After defeating the current wielder of the enchanted blade Cloud Gouger, Genichi Sojo, Chihiro has become the target of the Kaminabi. Their goal is to retrieve the Cloud Gouger and the 7th enchanted blade, Enten. With the upcoming Rakuzaichi auction featuring Shinuchi, that is said to be the most powerful enchanted blade forged by his father, along with the Kaminabi's strongest fighter Hyuki wielding the flame bone hunting him down, will Chihiro be able to continue his relentless quest to recover the stolen blades? Let's find out. A man recalled an incident from 5 years ago. When his pet, Samurai, a praying mantis, disappeared, he was overwhelmed with sadness for some time. Nevertheless, he gritted his teeth and pushed through. He was just sitting in a cafe, deep in thought, because during that time, he had lost his entire family. But as before, he believed he just needed to grit his teeth and push through. Due to his anxiety, while drinking, he spilled his drink, which concerned the waitress there. Suddenly, he noticed a light coming from outside. When he looked at it, he witnessed the battle between Chihiro and Sojo. It was at that moment when Sojo declared that the only purpose of the enchanted blades was to kill. The man appeared dazzled when Sojo attempted to electrocute everyone. He was troubled by this plan because he still had something he needed to do. He wondered when he noticed Chihiro's move. He smiled at his counterattack. Although he couldn't fully understand it, it seemed Chihiro was saying something about a lightning rod. He was curious if Chihiro had absorbed that lightning, because if so, he should have been dead. He saw Chihiro wobble because of it. The man thought he was indeed dead when he collapsed. However, as he observed him carefully, he called him Samurai. The scene shifted to November 1st, 18 days after Sojo's death, and 7 days before the Rakuzaichi auction. The man shown earlier could be heard again. He recalled how he was inspired by a samurai he saw, referring to Chihiro. This man was being beaten in the face and kicked repeatedly. He wondered why he was getting beat up. When one of the attacker's companions asked who he was, he simply replied that he tried to intervene when they were attempting to kidnap a child. He had seen how they were dragging the child, so he stepped in to help. He helped the child escape and told her to run, which angered them. The man desperately tried to prevent them from chasing after the little girl. As a result, he went with them and got into their car instead. He pleaded with them to take him away. Because of this, the gang members brought him to their boss. Instead of getting angry, the boss calmed his subordinates since the Rakuzaichi auction was approaching. He said he could easily buy young flesh to butcher there anyway. He added that a little fasting before feasting was fine. The gang members expressed regret for their boss, saying the escaped child was exactly his type. Because of this, he ordered them to leave and track her down. They kicked the rescuer and asked if he had heard that. They were curious why he would do something so pointless. He thought of Chihiro, believing he could become like him. They called him a little worm for acting brave. The man thought that indeed, they were out of his league. He said it was no wonder he ended up in this situation. While kneeling, he suddenly called them scumbags. He stood up and shouted Iso while forming a hand gesture. A black shadow even flared from his left eye because of this. The leader worried if he might be a sorcerer, but nothing happened afterward. The man was puzzled and just laughed, saying he was only joking. The gang leader became irritated, thinking he was making fun of him. So, he told his subordinates to enjoy beating him up before chopping him up and disposing of him. The other gang members laughed at his actions and were curious about his shouting of Iso. One of them noticed something and told his companion to look at the window. Meanwhile, the elevator across from them made a sound. When they looked, they noticed the goldfish. The man was concerned because he knew who was coming, so he warned the others. Just then, the elevator door opened and Chihiro was inside. The beaten man was surprised by his arrival. Chihiro confronted the gang members one by one, slicing through their bodies, while his summoned black goldfish could be seen. He even sent one of their companions flying outside the glass window. He then mentioned Kuro, causing his katana to be enveloped in black liquid. The leader became concerned and asked his subordinates what they were waiting for. He ordered them to kill Chihiro. However, Chihiro effortlessly slashed each one of them, causing the leader to lie down in fear. Chihiro approached him, stating that he was the man who had been rampaging these past few days. He asked him what he wanted. Flashing back to his conversation with Shiba, Chihiro asked what he meant about Sojo being just a puppet. When he had interrogated to gather information about Shinichi, he learned that Sojo didn't have it. Shiba was surprised because Sojo was listed as the one who put it up for auction, but the man replied that Sojo's name was merely used. Someone else was responsible for it. Because of this, Chihiro figured out it had something to do with Hishaku. When Shiba searched the storehouse, he found only research papers about weapons. But nothing was related to Shinichi or Hishaku, and so he thought Sojo had no connection to the upcoming auction. Chihiro pondered why Sojo had the Cloud Gouger, as it was supposedly the only usable sacred blade. Furthermore, only the Shinichi was being openly auctioned. He noted there were many creepy aspects to this. It seemed they would only get answers on the day of the auction itself. Therefore, Shiba said if they wanted to retrieve the Shinichi, they needed to do it before the Rakuzaichi auction. Shiba suggested they contact the Sazanami family. They were a powerful clan in the underworld, a family of sorcerers who had controlled Rakuzaichi for 2 centuries. This black market auction attracted VIPs from the underworld across different parts of Japan. He added that it no longer mattered who put the blade up for auction. After all auction items were held by the Sazanami family. So, instead of trying to get it on the day of Rakuzaichi, it would be faster to contact the Sazanami family before the auction. However, information about this clan was scarce. Only select people could contact them, exclusively the fat cats of the underworld. He called the Rakuzaichi customers with connections to the Sazanami family disgusting lowlifes. Chihiro remarked that they just needed to dig up who was who in society's underbelly. Back in the present, Chihiro wanted to ask the gang leader something, however, he had already fainted from fear. As Chihiro tried to wake him up, the beaten man suddenly called him samurai. Chihiro looked at him, wondering if he was an enemy, but given his condition, he appeared to be a prisoner there. He asked if the man was alright, to which the man replied that now he could see. He approached and said that what he needed in his life was a samurai, and Chihiro was the one. Chihiro was very surprised by these words and thought he must be confused. He tried to calm him down. He asked where the man lived and what his name was. The man replied that this was the second time he had seen Chihiro. He introduced himself as Hakuri Sazanami, saying their meeting was destined. Chihiro couldn't understand what he was talking about and just left. However, Hakuri followed and chased after him. He pleaded that he needed Chihiro's help, saying he couldn't do it alone. But Chihiro just ran away from him. Hakuri noticed how incredibly fast he was. After a moment, Chihiro stopped and thought, then asked for his name again. Once more, he introduced himself as Hakuri Sazanami. The surname was familiar, and Hikari mentioned they were an influential family of sorcerers. However, since many things had happened recently, he asked if he would listen to his story. Chihiro recalled the Sazanami family, whom they needed to contact. So he asked Hakuri what help he needed. Hakuri replied that if Chihiro knew about his family, then he probably knew about the Rakuzaichi auction. He said he wanted to destroy that despicable event. Chihiro was puzzled because their family controlled Rakuzaichi, so he asked why Hakuri would want to do that. Hakuri scratched his head and admitted he was formerly part of that family. Their motto was honor the Rakuzaichi, above all else. Everyone born into their family was trained in sorcery from childhood. They needed to become extremely powerful to protect Rakuzaichi with their lives, and however, Hakuri admitted he was the weakest child ever born into the Sazanami clan. He had no talent whatsoever for sorcery. Moreover, he interfered with their business, so they disowned him. He added that at this event, they sold people, whether alive or dead. He said both the sellers and buyers at that auction were disgusting. This had been normal to him since childhood, but one day, he suddenly realized how revolting it was. He knew it caused suffering for many people. Therefore, Rakuzaichi needed to be stopped. Chihiro walked straight to the elevator and got in. When Hakuri asked if saving people was his thing, Chihiro replied that it wasn't really. He just wanted to know about Rakuzaichi. Hakuri was extremely surprised, calling it a crazy coincidence that he was a Sazanami. Even Chihiro was surprised by this. While in the elevator, Chihiro asked if being a Sazanami meant Hakuri had inside information, such as where they kept their goods. He answered yes, then asked if Chihiro wanted to steal from there. Without hesitation, Chihiro said yes, specifying that he wanted to get the Shinichi. Hikori explained that although he was just a peon or low-ranking family member, if he wasn't mistaken, the Shinichi was this year's auction headliner. He said if he could get it, they would surely end Rakuzaichi. Hikori got excited, realizing they shared the same goal. Chihiro calmed him down again. Hikori had heard that the Shinichi was extremely powerful, so he asked why Chihiro wanted to steal it. Chihiro replied that he didn't know and would think about it after getting it. He admitted he was actually just scared, which surprised Hikori. He explained that Shinichi was a sacred blade and important to him. If someone was auctioning the Shinichi, they surely had a plan and blood would likely be shed. If he did nothing, that sacred blade would kill innocent people. He then remembered Sojo and what he did with the cloud gouger. He said he couldn't bear it if that happened again. Suddenly, Chihiro's phone rang. It was Shiba. When asked if he was okay, Chihiro said yes. Shiba mentioned hearing something from Azumi, but would share the full details later. After hanging up, when Hikori asked about the call, Chihiro said someone was looking for him. He needed to return to base quickly and Hikori should come along. The CCTV was visible, and when the elevator reached the ground level, someone was already waiting. Chihiro became concerned as he remembered what Shiba said about Hyuki Kaguri. She was part of Kamyanabi, known as the wielder of the flame bone of the starving. The flame bone was similar to sacred blades, but possessed power beyond regular sorcery. Hyuki called on Rikuo to help her. The floor gradually cracked and something emerged from below. Hyuki announced she was looking for Chihiro Rokuhira. Her hands and upper body were ablaze. She warned that Chihiro should surrender his sacred blade, and she wouldn't have to use her flame bone. Clueless, Hikori wondered if Chihiro was using a sacred blade. He also questioned when he heard the surname Rokuhira. Chihiro noticed that the people who were there when they arrived were gone, and the atmosphere of the place had changed. He was curious if this was sorcery. The receptionist, who looked like a sumo wrestler, explained that this space was a holy sumo ring separate from the regular world. The spell wouldn't dissolve until their match was finished. Chihiro stated that he had no reason to fight the Kamyanabi. Before he could finish speaking, Hyuki suddenly attacked him. Fortunately, he managed to block it with his katana. Hyuki said they had a reason to fight him. She demanded again that Chihiro hand over the sacred blade. Chihiro activated Aka, causing the red goldfish to emerge to block any incoming attacks directed at him. Meanwhile, Hikori just watched from inside the elevator. Despite Chihiro's efforts, he seemed to struggle against Hyuki's flame bone. Hyuki asked where the other sacred blade was, and Chihiro responded that he had destroyed the cloud gouger. In his thoughts, he realized how powerful the flame bone's spirit energy was, as even red couldn't fully absorb it. Hyuki was shocked to hear about the blade's destruction. She wondered if it was possible to destroy a sacred blade, and the receptionist accused Chihiro of lying. But Chihiro replied that it didn't matter anymore. He said to let it go since he had no interest in killing her. Hyuki became irritated at Chihiro's words and his noble beliefs. She declared that regardless of what Chihiro believed, anyone who wields a sacred blade is self-serving. She said there was no reason for him to wield such a powerful weapon. The Kamyanabi should control the sacred blades for their nation's welfare. She called out Rikuo, ribs, and a flaming rib-like structure emerged from below. This forced Chihiro to jump to avoid it. Hyuki asked if he had met Kazane. Chihiro blocked another of her attacks with his katana. Hyuki explained that Kazane had lost his right shoulder and almost everyone he admired. She said such tragedies occur when individuals possess sacred blades. She was referring to the results of Sojo's actions. Therefore, if Chihiro continued to wield a sacred blade, he would only bring more misery. While observing from inside the elevator, Hikori realized that Chihiro, whom he called Samurai, was on the defensive and in serious trouble. Though hesitant, he called out to him and remembered what Chihiro had said earlier, that if he did nothing, the sacred blade would kill innocent people. Chihiro was visibly struggling in the battle, so Hikori wondered why he was hesitating. Inspired by Chihiro's determination, he took action and ran forward, shouting "Go to hell." When Hyuki was about to catch and attack Chihiro, Hikori intervened, stepping between them. resulting in him taking a hit to the face. This shocked everyone. Due to the serious injury he sustained from the flame bone, he collapsed to the ground. Although he said he didn't understand Chihiro's situation regarding wielding the sacred blade, he wondered if it was really that complicated. Nonetheless, he acknowledged that Chihiro had saved him. Chihiro just stared at him, shocked by Hakuri's selfless decision. Hakuri explained that Chihiro hadn't just saved him that day. As he mentioned, this was actually the second instance. He said she was there when Chihiro fought against the lightning dude, referring to Sojo. According to him, Chihiro deliberately took the electrical attack to protect him and others who were present. The receptionist commented that Chihiro seemed like a good person, but Hiyuki quickly silenced him. Chihiro found himself deep in thought about his words. Hakuri wasn't finished and declared that he was certain of one thing: the katana suited Chihiro perfectly. He urged him to quickly defeat his opponents so they could obtain the Shinuchi. Hiyuki couldn't believe what she heard. Even the sumo wrestler-like person was shocked to learn they also wanted to acquire the Shinuchi. This gave Hiyuki even more reason to take him down. Meanwhile, Hakuri was struggling with his injuries and felt he might lose consciousness. Hiyuki reminded them of her earlier statement that a katana as dangerous as that should be in the nation's possession, referring to the Kamianabi. She stated that if Chihiro Rokuhira was truly a good person, he should cooperate and hand over that enchanted blade. Tafuku, who appeared to be a receptionist there, had no tricks behind his sorcery. None of them could leave that space until the duel was finished. It was impossible for them to simply let him go. Therefore, Hiyuki presented him with two choices: surrender the sword or face death. Additionally, there was the sword's eternal contract. If he resisted, he would die as a traitor to his own country. Chihiro remained silent, listening to everything being said. Hiyuki added that she disliked killing the weakling. She questioned whether he had killed Sojo after taming the Cloud Gouger, noting that he hadn't yet demonstrated those skills. If they were going to do this, she declared, it was time to end this lukewarm situation. Chihiro recalled the broken Cloud Gouger and reflected on how truly dangerous enchanted blades were. He had learned this firsthand. Sojo had called it a weapon of mass destruction, and even his father had mentioned it was still a tool for taking lives. He acknowledged that enchanted blades indeed possessed limitless potential. So when he remembered what Hakuri said about how he had saved him using it, he knew he couldn't hesitate. Tafuku then warned Hiyuki that it's coming. This was because Chihiro had summoned the Nishiki. He declared that he wouldn't simply hand it over to others. He remembered his father's words about how a katana's purpose was to defeat evil and protect the weak. Therefore, he needed to master it. He took his stance and announced it was time to bust through. When Hiyuki noticed this, she once again commanded Rakuo to summon the ribs, which acted as her flaming barrier to ward off Chihiro, who could do nothing but circle around it. Hiyuki recalled that according to Kazane, Hajiwara and the others had been mowed down by Sojo's lightning at high speed, and it was Chihiro's high speed that had ended that high-speed threat. She realized it was beyond what she had imagined. Nevertheless, she remained determined to capture him. Chihiro knew that Hiyuki intended to keep releasing fire to prevent him from getting close. However, he spotted an opening from behind. Tafuku thought to himself that it was just a trap, and he was right. She suddenly looked behind her. When Chihiro attacked, she caught his weapon with her hand. Tafuku was impressed by her sword grab, but Hiyuki was shocked to realize she had only caught his short sword. Chihiro explained that he knew how a strong fighter would respond, which was why he had outsmarted her and created an opportunity to attack. Tafuku couldn't believe that Chihiro had managed to switch blades and deliberately let her grab it. He tried to warn Hiyuki, but it was too late. Chihiro targeted and struck her head, but instead of dodging, she accepted the hit and tapped his katana, calling him little punk. Tafuku was incredulous, knowing she could have easily avoided that strike. But Chihiro realized Hiyuki had intentionally taken his hit. Hiyuki signaled and unleashed fire at him, determined to kill him. The impact of that attack was tremendous, causing an explosion that affected even where Chihiro stood. Fortunately, he managed to escape quickly. Hiyuki was furious, reminding him that she had told him to stop this lukewarm crap. She declared she was ready to kill him, so he shouldn't strike her with the flat side of his blade. Despite being bloodied, She was smiling and said that she couldn't do that unless he comes at him for real. Her life should also be on the line. She was clearly enjoying the thrill of a fight to the death, which prompted Hakuri and Tofuku to comment on how freaky she was. But then, Tofuku was troubled by Hiyuki's words. He realized that Chihiro was genuinely a good person. They had told Chihiro that his sorcery had sealed off the area, yet Chihiro hadn't targeted him, though he was prepared for such an attack. He was curious if Chihiro simply couldn't do it. But that didn't seem to be the case. Chihiro wasn't as idiotic as the other guy, Hakuri. He noticed how Chihiro was trying to face Hiyuki's challenge head-on. Chihiro had no interest in killing her. Tofuku observed that he was giving his all. In truth, he found it quite admirable and cool. As for his colleague Hiyuki, even though she could sense this to some degree, she had become blinded by her own position and pride. She challenged Chihiro again, declaring she wouldn't be able to kill him unless he attacked with real killing intent. She said he was seriously annoying her, so she would kill him. Suddenly, Hiyuki demanded the spinal column from Rikuo, which alarmed both Chihiro and Tofuku. This meant she was serious about killing Chihiro. Meanwhile, Tofuku noticed Hakuri lying on the ground, looking like he might faint at any moment. So he shouted to Hiyuki that the force field would break. This worried her, causing her to cancel the spinal column request she had made. Tofuku's battle space suddenly disappeared, revealing the outside world and ordinary citizens around them. The bloodied Hiyuki stopped and staggered. Fortunately, Tofuku caught and pulled her back. When she asked him where Chihiro was, he replied that he had taken the moron and left. Hiyuki was curious about why the spell had vanished. He explained that it was because the dopey one Hakuri had fainted, signaling the end of the contest. Hiyuki couldn't believe it, saying she hadn't hit him that hard. Tofuku acknowledged that she had held back, but that man was simply too weak. He then asked her about their next step. Now that they knew what their targets were seeking, she said that would be what they would pursue as well. Elsewhere, someone commented that this year's auction would be wild. This was Kura Sazanami, the head of the Sazanami family and lead auctioneer of Rakuzaichi. He said their headliner this year was unprecedented, the Shinuchi Enchanted Blade. It had been wielded by a master swordsman during the war and was unequaled even among the 6 sacred blades. He called it Kunishige Rokuhira's sublime masterpiece. However, due to its external contract, its true value remained untouchable. When Kura moved his gloved hand near the Shinuchi's case, the scene showed a person twitching while sitting in a place filled with talismans. Kura withdrew his hand and said that was only for now. He stated it no longer mattered what kind of chaos might occur. As always, they would protect the Rakuzaichi. He was inside the arena where the auction would take place, and he couldn't help feeling nervous. Meanwhile, it was shown that Chihiro and Hakuri, as well as Hiyuki and Tofuku, had prepared themselves for their goal of obtaining the Shinuchi. The wielder mentioned by Kura was then revealed. In the next scene, Hakuri was sobbing intensely after hearing Chihiro's story. He said he had no idea that was what Chihiro meant about his plan to reclaim the Shinuchi. He remarked that even his destiny was extremely samurai-like. Shiba was curious about what this meant. Char then arrived, delighted to see Chihiro had returned. He thanked Hinao for watching over her. She replied it wasn't a problem since she had nothing else to do, as her cafe was wrecked and currently under reconstruction. Char proudly announced that she had gotten better at healing. She wanted to look at his arm, saying she would try to fix it for him. He thanked her but first pointed to Hakuri and asked if she could fix his face. Hakuri had his face covered, and Char asked who he was. He was actually wiping away his tears, which prompted Char to call him a mess. Shiba asked if it was really okay to tell Hakuri everything, expressing uncertainty about trusting a Sazanami. Chihiro responded that Hakuri wasn't a bad guy. When he was under attack from the flame bone, he had shielded him with his body to take the hit. This made Shiba realize Hakuri was indeed a good person, and Char agreed to heal him. Shiba was relieved that he was okay and had him sit down. They thanked him, though agreeing he was indeed a mess, so Char proceeded to heal him. After that, Hakuri revealed to them that the Shinuchi they were looking for was in the storehouse. He explained that what his father called the Sazanami clan's storage space was simply known as the storehouse. When Chihiro asked who his father was, Hakuri replied that it was Kura Sazanami, the head of the Sazanami clan. He added that all Rakuzaichi items were kept in the storehouse, and the Shinichi was likely there too. Chihiro declared that's where they would go. However, Hikori admitted he didn't know the storehouse's location. He explained that while all members of the Sazanami family, including himself, had been to the storehouse before, none of them actually knew its location except for his father, the clan leader. This revelation caused Chihiro and Shiba to exchange glances. The scene shifted to a park where Hiyuki was complaining about her headache. Tofuku blamed her for it, saying it was due to her pride, but Hiyuki insisted it was that jerk Chihiro's fault for being so cheeky. They went to a specific spot and stated their full names, Tofuku Mahara and Hiyuki Kakari. This seemed to activate something, and they suddenly vanished from where they stood. They reappeared inside an elevator somewhere beneath Tokyo. This was the path to the Kaminabi Tokyo headquarters. The bearded leader of the group remarked that it was unusual for Hiyuki to come unbidden, asking about her assignment. She reported that they had made contact with Chihiro Rokuhira, but he had escaped. She apologized, admitting she felt pathetic. Another leader wearing shades asked what had happened, questioning how someone could escape Tofuku's power since he was with her. Tofuku apologized, explaining there had been interference. Hiyuki insisted it was just a fluke and next time he would be dead. The bearded leader couldn't believe they came all that way just to say that. Hiyuki denied this, explaining they were there to learn about the plan for Rakuzaichi. She asked if they weren't planning to recover the Shinichi. They confirmed this, but said it had nothing to do with her. Hiyuki insisted on attending the auction, explaining that Chihiro Rokuhira was also targeting the Shinichi. She suggested they needed a joint plan to obtain both the Shinichi and the seventh blade. However, he refused, shocking Hiyuki. He clarified that to reclaim the Shinichi, they didn't need fighters like her. The plan was to bid for the Shinichi, as its owner was under strict Kaminabi control. Therefore, they couldn't afford to act recklessly. Hiyuki couldn't believe this. She argued that the real issue wasn't just about the Shinichi, but about Rakuzaichi itself. She described the Sazanami as vile lowlifes involved in human trafficking. Getting the Shinichi would give them a chance to destroy their whole operation. She couldn't accept that they wanted to pay money just to get the sacred blade, arguing this would only encourage the auction. The other leader tried to calm Hiyuki down. He said her opinion was valid, and even among the top brass, opinions were divided. However, if they went to war with the Sazanami family, even Kaminabi won't emerge unscathed, which they couldn't afford. While Kaminabi had the owner, criminals had the sacred blade. For now, they were stuck in a deadlock. In the current situation, investing large sums of money meant temporarily succumbing to evil, but if they could retrieve the Shinichi without losing people, it would be worth it. Tofuku listened quietly to the discussion, considering how all Sazanami members underwent intensive sorcery training from childhood. Moreover, they were ready to sacrifice their lives to protect Rakuzaichi. Therefore, he understood the leader's decision and opinion to avoid war with that clan for everyone's benefit. Though frustrating, he admitted they had a point. The scene shifted to Kura Sazanami speaking with someone. He mentioned they had just finished the run-through for Rakuzaichi without any issues. Sitting in his car, he asked his conversation partner how things were on their end. He couldn't help thinking about something, and confirmed whether they had the other 4 sacred blades. Regarding the Shinichi, he knew they weren't auctioning it just for money. He asked about their plan. The person on the other line replied that he couldn't tell him but assured him not to worry. They wouldn't endanger Rakuzaichi. He brought up a real concern, which Kura knew referred to the 7th sword. Their car then appeared to enter some kind of force field. The man on the line was curious about why he seemed unconcerned. He replied that it wouldn't change their goal. When asked if he could win in a fight against the sacred blade, he denied it, saying he wasn't that arrogant. However, he declared that the Shinichi wouldn't fall into the hands of dissidents. His car drove straight into a forest where the massive Sazanami estate stood. He was greeted by his excited children, happy to see him home. Shortly after, he went inside and climbed the stairs, saying he would meditate. He ordered a servant to bring his shursen tea in exactly 10 minutes. Upon reaching upstairs, he opened a door to a room and entered, seeming to notice something. Inside, he spoke, explaining that the entire estate grounds were protected by a force field. Only Sazanami clan members could detect and enter it. Shiba was inside, sitting in an office chair. He was impressed by his calmness. Chihiro was with him, and Kyura simply responded that this was because he knew when to give up. He noticed the enchanted blade Chihiro was holding and commented that in his line of work, he was used to appraising the quality of things. He was surprised because was just speaking of that sacred blade earlier. However, Chihiro silenced him, saying he would only answer questions. He demanded to know where the Shinichi was. Water droplets could be seen dripping up his sacred blade. In response, Kyura asked if they would leave if he told them where it was. Suddenly, a black shadow emerged from his left eye, which was covered by a white eyepiece. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the house servant was busy. She was boiling water for the tea that Kyura had requested. Back in the room, Chihiro noticed a strange discoloration in Kyura's eyes, which prompted him to raise his sword, ready for combat. Kyura stopped him, saying that wasn't a fighting stance. He mentioned he wasn't interested in head-on conflict. Chihiro asked again about the whereabouts of the Shinichi. Instead of answering, Kyura just said he had heard rumors about the seventh blade. He said it was an honor to see it in person. He noticed the blade pattern and sheen, commenting that it looked like a decorative piece. He said it was obviously made by Rokuhira. This meant, he deduced, that he must be Chihiro Rokuhira. And since he possessed that sword, he must be the child of the famous swordsmith. They hadn't expected this. Kyura even knew Chihiro's name. This made Shiba wonder if the Kaminabi had leaked this information. He thought there was something peculiar about this. Kyura was unusually calm despite facing an enemy wielding a sacred blade in his private chambers. Flashing back to their planning, Hakuri was surprised that they wanted to infiltrate their house directly. Nevertheless, it made sense, as only his father knew the location of the storehouse. He thought their only option was to ask him directly. He said he would tell them everything they needed to know. However, if they were to approach his father, he warned them to watch out for the toe. Chihiro was curious about what that meant. Hakuri explained that the toe was the special defense corps of the Sazanami clan. The toe consisted of the 4 top fighters among the 50 sorcerers of the Sazanami clan. Their primary function was to protect his father, who was the leader of the group. He mentioned that all Sazanami children admired that group, but he couldn't reach their level. According to him, his older brothers were frightening and incredibly strong. Back to the present, Shiba noticed that Kyura showed no signs of summoning the toe. When they had spoken with Hakuri earlier, Shiba had suggested that if the group appeared, he could just talk to them to calm things down, since they were his family. However, Hakuri had replied that if they found him, they would kill him without hesitation. Therefore, they had left him behind, anticipating that a battle would occur. Kyura told them that if they wanted the Shinichi, he would appreciate if they did things properly and bid for it. Chihiro stood up angrily, questioning what Kyura meant by proper when the Shinichi belonged to his father. Suddenly, Kyura made a gesture, and they were startled to see a display case appear, containing the Shinichi's box. Chihiro studied it carefully, remembering his past conversations with his father about the enchanted blades, including the reason for the mark on his face. When Chihiro tried to touch the box, he was surprised when his hand passed through both the display case and the box. Kyura explained that this was merely a preview and couldn't be touched. He was currently using his sorcery to project images of items stored in the storehouse. He called the Shinichi a masterpiece. He added that nothing is of more value in this life. The Shinichi had taken countless lives, he said, so it needed to be valued appropriately. He told Chihiro that even if he was Rokuhira's son, he shouldn't interfere. Thanks to Kunishige Rokuhira's death, he said, it was guaranteed that no new sacred blades would be created. The silhouette of the market was clear, he claimed. Finally, he said, the Shinichi would be given its proper value. They were angered by his financial motivation, and Shiba prepared to take action. However, Chihiro quickly moved to hold his sword against Kyura's neck. He demanded that Kyura hand over the Shinichi. Kyura asked if Chihiro would kill him if he didn't hand it over. Yes, he answered. Again, he asked where the real sword and the storehouse were. Kyura said the answer was tricky, as one could say it was inside him. This made Chihiro curious about what he meant. Kyura then showed another image, but this time, it was the complete picture. The two looked around and observed. Kyura clarified that the storehouse didn't physically exist, It was like a subspace created by sorcery. Only direct descendants of the Sazanami dynasty heads had authority over that space. He called it a sacred storage space. The two pondered why he so casually revealed this secret to them, something that even the Sazanami family didn't know. They wondered what he was planning, especially since Hikori had claimed to have been there before, yet said no one knew its location. Kyura added that it was impossible for outsiders like them to enter that place. He had complete control over everything that entered and existed there because it was his world, and if he were to die, the storehouse would disappear along with everything inside it. Besides the statues, there were also people imprisoned inside, waiting to be auctioned off. Even with Chihiro's blade at his throat, Kyura insisted he wouldn't hand over the Shinichi. In that case, he knew Chihiro would kill him. But Kyura asked if he had changed his mind. Chihiro couldn't answer when he noticed a mother and child among those imprisoned in the storehouse. Again, Kyura asked if he would kill him, along with everyone else there. Chihiro recalled what Hikori had said about how all the sellers and buyers at the auction were despicable, as they had caused tremendous suffering to many people. Shiba realized that Kyura had been truthful earlier when he said he wasn't interested in head-on conflict. He knew he couldn't fight against a sacred blade, which was why he revealed the storehouse's secrets to them. Shiba called it a bold move. So, Shiba threatened that until Kyura was ready to hand over the Shinichi, they would torture him and rip out his fingernails. Kyura remained unfazed and even agreed to this. However, he warned that for every nail they cut off, he would strangle one resident in the storehouse, something that would be very easy for him to do since it was his space. He said these were truly valuable pieces, but it couldn't be helped. Their value couldn't compare to the Shinichi. After all, he claimed, they were replaceable. Shiba couldn't determine how serious Kyura was. All he had done was show them images, and it could have been a bluff. But that wasn't the point. He knew who they were. Chihiro couldn't help but feel powerless in this situation as he looked at the projection of the captives inside the storehouse. Because of this, he lowered his sword. He couldn't gamble with other people's lives. Kyura smiled as his tactic succeeded. How fortunate that they're both clever and benevolent, Kyura said. Shiba paused and thought about what was mentioned earlier, that only direct descendants of the Sazanami could enter the storehouse. If what he said was true, he wondered if Hikori could interfere. However, he remembered Hikori's admission that he had no talent for sorcery and that his father had disowned him. So that possibility seemed hopeless too. Shiba suggested to Chihiro that they should withdraw. However, Kyura didn't agree, saying the situation had changed. Suddenly, 3 people entered the room and positioned themselves in front of him. He said that since they had entered his house uninvited, they should leave a gift, and what he wanted was Chihiro's 7th blade. Shiba realized these were the elite forces. First, Kyura had drained their desire to fight, and now he was on the offensive. Shiba remembered what Hikori had said about the toe being composed of 4 top fighters. Kyura asked the newcomers about Soya's whereabouts, and a woman replied that he wasn't feeling well. Another responded that wasn't the case. He was actually looking for Hikori. This made Shiba nervous when he heard it. Kyura was annoyed, saying that person still hadn't learned. He asked if the 3 of them could handle the intruders, and one simply replied that they would find out. They prepared themselves as one made a hand gesture, releasing a black shadow from his left eye. In another location, Hikori was anxious about what might be happening to them. When Shiba had asked him about his combat abilities, he had replied that he was useless. That's why they had just left him there after getting information from him. Meanwhile, he now had asked him for help. Since they were just errands, he accepted, saying he could definitely handle such tasks. As he left, he bumped into someone. They were both surprised when they saw each other. Hikori knew this man who said he had been looking for him. It turned out to be Hikori's older brother. Back at the Sazanami estate, Shiba noticed that the Toe members appeared experienced. These were certainly on a different level compared to the sorcerers at Sojo's place. He pointed out that Kyura was clearly capable of fighting if he wanted to, contradicting his earlier statement about avoiding conflict. That's right, Kyura replied, while the 3 sorcerers prepared themselves. In his mind, Kyura thought that he and the Toe could fight, even against an enchanted blade. He was prepared to face whatever losses they might incur. If it means they could obtain the seventh blade, then he didn't care about anything else. He said they should understand now, they had no hope of stealing the Shinichi. According to him, they came as hunters, but it was the opposite, as they were the hunters. Shiba stepped forward, saying there was no point in fighting anymore and they should retreat. However, Chihiro refused. Looking behind, he had already activated the Nishiki. He recalled what Shiba had told him about the Kaminabi likely participating in the auction for the Shinichi. Chihiro had been concerned about whether Azumi would be okay, given how much information he was leaking. But Shiba was confident that Azumi would be fine. He explained that the Kaminabi was the nation itself. They could pour as much money as they wanted. They aimed to win the Shinichi at any cost. And once the bidding for the Shinichi began, it would surely end up in Kaminabi's hands. This also meant that Kaminabi would be able to wield that enchanted blade. Once again, the wielder trapped in one place was shown. Chihiro remembered asking his father why the Shinichi's box was different from other blades. He wondered if that meant it was more powerful. His father had replied that it wasn't just stronger, but different. That's why it needed more security than the others. Young Chihiro had asked if that didn't apply to other blades too. Wouldn't it be safer if the Kaminabi just held on to them? Kunishige hadn't agreed, saying too much had happened, and he would tell him about it next time. The reason why it needed to be more secure and the reason why it couldn't be passed to the Kaminabi were the same. The Shinichi was the only sword they couldn't allow to be used again. Back in the present, because of this, they had no choice but to steal the Shinichi from the storehouse before the bidding. Chihiro thought about what good escaping would do now. If they regrouped and formulated a plan, there was still too much they didn't know about the storehouse. He said running away wasn't okay. They needed to act right there and then. Shiba noticed the conviction in his eyes, but suddenly, the phone in his pocket started ringing. Back to Hakuri's situation, Soya admitted that he had missed his brother. Hakuri was extremely nervous upon seeing him. He remembered how he and other members of the Sazanami family had ganged up on him and beaten him. Because of this, he suddenly jumped toward the ledge, but Soya caught him by his clothes. He said that Hakuri was too weak and could die falling from such a height. Hakuri replied that it would be better if he fell. He knew Soya came there to kill him since he had destroyed their merchandise. Soya just smiled and said that wasn't the reason. Besides, they are brothers. He said he only came to bring him back. Hakuri remained quiet while Soya pulled him up. Soya Sazanami was 5 years older than Hakuri. He was a member of the Toe. He truly loved Hakuri, but his way of showing it was through punches and kicks. He tried to convince Hakuri to return, saying he would talk to their father. He claimed the only reason Hakuri had disobeyed the Sazanami family was because of that merchandise woman who had tempted him, who was the reason he went crazy. Well, she was dead now, he said, so Hakuri must have woken up. Hakuri remembered the woman Soya was referring to, and said he wouldn't return because he was no longer part of the Sazanami family. Soya couldn't believe what he heard. He even started crying because Hakuri wasn't the type to talk back to others. Just then, he now came down the stairs and called out to Hakuri. She said it looked like it would rain, so she had brought him an umbrella. She noticed he was talking to someone and asked if he was busy. Hakuri became worried for her, while Soya seemed to understand the situation. He said Hakuri had gotten involved with another bad woman and was being influenced again. Still crying, he said he would kill Hinao, so Hakuri should return to their family. Hakuri lunged at his brother and told Hinao to run. However, Soya caught his hand and suddenly punched him directly in the face, knocking him to the ground, which alarmed Hinao. Soya told her to return his younger brother to him. As Soya approached Hinao, Hakuri grabbed his leg and said that woman had nothing to do with this. They were the ones who were going crazy. This confused Soya because in his mind, he was just trying to save his brother. At that point, Shiba suddenly teleported behind Soya, asking if this was the man Hinao had mentioned. When Hinao pointed and confirmed this, Soya was shocked when Shiba suddenly struck him in the face and grabbed his clothes. Shiba suggested they move to a more spacious area, which turned out to mean up in the air, far from Hakuri and Hinao. The discoloration in Soya's eye suddenly appeared as he demanded the return of his younger brother. Shiba thought to himself that Hakuri was a crucial source of intelligence since he had been to the storehouse. So he apologized to Soya, saying Hakuri was now part of their group. At the staircase, while lying down, Hakuri asked Hinao if that was Shiba. He had thought Shiba was with his father. Hinao explained that a lot had happened, and to protect Char, they had implemented a genius system she had thought up. All she needed to do was ring Shiba's cell phone, and he would instantly arrive using his magic. She had hidden her phone behind her back to dial Shiba's number and alert him while he was at the Sazanami estate. Shiba knew it was Hinao, so Chihiro had sent him away. But before leaving, Shiba had asked if he had a plan, to which Chihiro had simply replied that he would figure it out. The Toe members activated their Iso, while Chihiro jumped out the window. It was a 1 versus 3 battle, making Kura curious about what would happen. He just sipped his tea while watching their fight outside. When Hakuri moved again, his older brother Soya called out to him while in midair fighting Shiba. Meanwhile, he now asked if Hakuri could still stand. She supported him, and he expressed his gratitude. During the battle, Shiba anticipated the famous fighting technique of the Sazanami family. He knew they could create and command shockwaves. Though Soya was still crying, he managed to activate his Iso. He positioned both his hands behind him to use its shock waves to propel himself toward Shiba. However, Shiba dodged and merely pointed his hand at Soya's head. Shiba thought that although Soya's movements were simple, he also has a fast reaction speed. Soya aimed his shock wave-forming hand at Shiba, but fortunately, Shiba managed to evade. The shock wave Soya released was so powerful that it hit the apartment building behind them, resulting in the destruction of its staircase. Upon seeing this, Shiba thought that Soya seemed to be the strongest in Toe. But if the other 3 members of Toe were nearly as strong as him, plus their father and his mysterious storehouse, he figured Chihiro would struggle even with an enchanted blade. He thought it would be better to bring that man back to the Sazanami estate and fight 5 against 2. Back to Chihiro, who was still facing the 3 members of Toe, using Nishiki to dodge their shockwave attacks. He even managed to cut through one of their blades. Kura had also descended there, and upon seeing what happened, he was impressed by Chihiro's speed and the enchanted blade's capabilities. One of the Toe members shouted to their father requesting 2 more blades since his was broken. Because of this, 2 black bubble-like forms emerged near his feet, gradually producing blades. Seeing this, Chihiro wondered if this was the power of the storehouse, as they had been pulling weapons out of nowhere for a while now. He was frustrated because he still couldn't understand its scope. Meanwhile, Kura just sat watching them. He noticed Shiba's absence and realized that this might have been the sorcery they used to infiltrate their house. He thought it was a very convenient form of transport. However, Chihiro had chosen to stay there alone. He recalled when Shiba bid farewell and asked if he had a plan, to which Chihiro simply replied that he would figure it out. Kura wondered if he thought he still had a chance. Once again, one of Kura's children called out to him, requesting an even stronger weapon, while another member challenged Chihiro to come closer. He attacked, and Chihiro didn't expect him to use a shock wave to stop his momentum. The other 2 Toe members quickly approached him. One was holding a sword, while the other was armed with a shock wave. Fortunately, Shiba suddenly teleported back, carrying Soya with him. One of them was shocked when he faced his brother. Due to this, they canceled out each other's shock waves. Shiba asked how his timing was, and Chihiro replied that it was perfect. The one with braided hair was curious about where Soya came from, who was still crying. Soya wondered why he was brought back to their house, just when he finally found Hakuri. Kura became concerned about the situation. Shiba had returned carrying Soya, who announced that he had found Hakuri. Because of this, Kura realized this was connected to the earlier phone call, and his suspicions were confirmed. Another black bubble appeared. He said he had an idea when he saw the 2 suddenly appear in their house, but he didn't want to believe it. However, he was right about that, and who he was referring to was Hakuri, who emerged from that black bubble. Kura said he was the one who brought them there. Meanwhile, back to Hinao, she wondered why Hakuri disappeared and where he went. Back at Sazanami Estate, Shiba questioned why Hakuri was suddenly there. While lying face down on the floor, Hakuri was shocked to see his father again. Kura explained that he could retrieve at will any item registered in his storehouse, just like how he summoned the Toe. He revealed that all Sazanami members are registered in a ceremony at birth. This way, he could protect his children from outside enemies during emergencies. He added that any sorcerer could easily sense that they were registered. However, Hikori didn't know this. Kyura stepped on him and asked them if he was their informant. He was curious if they wanted him back. They couldn't believe that Kyura was using his own child as a hostage and would likely demand the sacred blade in exchange. When Kyura pointed a sword at Hikori, Shiba simply replied that it was too bad he had already told them everything he knew. Besides, they barely knew him, so Kyura could do whatever he wanted with him. In his mind, Shiba hoped Hikori would realize he was just bluffing. He added that he would leave their family matters to them. He thought that this threat wouldn't work to obtain the enchanted blade. He noticed that Kyura's hand was trembling, which meant he didn't want to kill his own child. Kyura asked what he was looking at, and if he thinks he was hesitating because of his trembling hand. He said it was the opposite. He was trembling with rage and sadness. That pathetic wretch was born into the Sazanami family, yet he couldn't even perform sorcery. He called him useless, and worse, a hindrance. Therefore, his life was worthless. But even so, he said he would be sad to kill his own child. At first, he thought about just banishing him, but he wasted that kindness. Again, he had caused problems for the family, and now he seemed worthless even as a hostage. Chihiro and Shiba became troubled by Kyura's words. When they saw that he was ready to kill Hikori, Chihiro gripped his katana, which puzzled Hikori. He stated that as far as he was concerned, Hikori is worth quite a lot. In his thoughts, he apologized to Shiba and his father. He remembered how Hikori had told him the katana suited him and mentioned that he had saved him. Therefore, there was no other way. Hikori couldn't believe what Chihiro said and what he was planning to do. In response, Kyura challenged him to show just how important Hikori was to him. The scene suddenly jumped back to Hinao, who was surprised to see them return. Shiba was with Chihiro, along with Hikori, who could do nothing but repeatedly apologize to them. Meanwhile, at the Kaminabi headquarters, someone went to report to a leader there about a new Rakuzaichi item, which shocked him. In Kyura's office, he said that his son Hikori had become useful for the first time. Now, they would have the greatest event in history, because the 7th enchanted blade of Kunishige Rokuhira's legacy, Enten, was also up for auction. Back to Hikori, he still couldn't accept that Chihiro had given up his special sword for him, and thought he had only managed to drag him down. Shiba apologized because he said he shouldn't have returned one of the Toe members there. But Chihiro replied that he was happy when he appeared there again. If anyone was to blame, he said it should be him because he chose to stay behind. But actually, he said no one was really at fault. He was pleased that everything happened exactly according to his plan. Hikori was puzzled by what he said, and Shiba asked if what he really wanted to do was give them Enten. He answered yes. At the storehouse, water droplets could be seen dripping upward from Enten, and Chihiro said nothing had gone wrong. Fast forward to November 3rd, at a restaurant, Hiyuki said that her order was mixed up with Tofuku's. The large platter of pasta was supposed to be hers while the dessert was for Tofuku. Tofuku asked if she should really eat that much, and Hiyuki just replied that she needed to charge up on spaghetti because she was going to kill that man. Tofuku suddenly took out his phone and showed her the news about a new Rakuzaichi auction item, which was the 7th enchanted blade. Hiyuki was shocked when she saw it. They couldn't figure out why this happened. Hiyuki thought that Chihiro might have done it for money, but Tofuku wasn't convinced about that. He thought it wasn't about money. Hiyuki was curious why he seemed so nonchalant about it, saying he should have told her immediately, and so Tofuku apologized for that. Hiyuki then wondered what Chihiro could be planning. That evening, while in the car, Chihiro said that for now, they only had a few hypotheses about the storehouse. First, Hikori might have some power to interfere with it. And Shiba added, insurance. Because Kyura had said that if he died, the storehouse would disappear, they had proven that the Sazanami clan was devoted to protecting the Rakuzaichi with their lives. Meanwhile, Hikori remained quiet in the back while the two talked. Chihiro added that if Kyura risked his life and died, then the storehouse would just vanish and the Rakuzaichi would be over. This was completely opposite to their goal. Shiba said that even if he had a backup plan in case he died accidentally or from natural causes, he surely had insurance. However, they weren't sure if Kyura was telling the truth, and Shiba was annoyed by this. He said it was possible that the storehouse actually existed somewhere in real life, and they were just transporting weapons from there, and Chihiro agreed. For now, there were too many possibilities, and to narrow them down, they needed to do reconnaissance to better understand the storehouse. If that would work, Shiba said reconnaissance was a great tactic. In the back, he now asked if the enchanted blade had a recon function. Char and she were impressed if that was the case, saying it was fully featured. Shiba clarified that it wasn't a function, but more like a side effect. Chihiro explained that the goldfish was a manifestation of his spirit power. He could move it freely like his arms or legs. Using it, he could also get a general sense of what was happening in the surroundings, and usually, he would send the goldfish ahead into enemy territory to scope out the area, just like when he rescued Hakuri. Char understood what he was saying. When Shiba asked if he could activate the goldfish remotely, Chihiro replied that he had tried that after hearing the report from the Hagiwara troops about Sojo casting Mei remotely. When they retrieved the cloud gouger from him, he had still cast Mei, allowing lightning to manifest around the blade. He added that it wasn't difficult. He just needed to charge it with his spirit energy before releasing it. However, once the energy was depleted, it would stop working. Shiba was worried because back then, Sojo was only within 100 meters of the cloud gouger. Right now, they had no idea where the storehouse was, so he asked if it would work. Chihiro was determined to try. Shiba observed quietly when Chihiro admitted he wasn't sure either. But in any case, they would have been at a dead end. Therefore, he said that risk was necessary. Shiba thought that even so, this was still a huge gamble. He was impressed by Chihiro's poker face despite having so much at stake. He was shocked and got goosebumps. When asked if this was really okay with him, he replied that letting go of Enten wasn't easy for him, but Hakuri was the deciding factor. Hakuri pondered upon hearing this. He wasn't sure, but since he was captured, they needed to risk it. Shiba noticed that Hakuri was quiet in the back, since he might be feeling bad about it. Moreover, he recalled when Kyura said his life was worthless. Though he didn't know the whole backstory, he thought Hakuri might not be feeling well, because his own father was ready to kill him. So, he just asked if he wanted ice cream. Hakuri declined and said he was fine, then thanked him, but Char interjected saying she wanted some. Hakuri apologized again for being a burden to them, but Chihiro said he had helped him make that move, which puzzled Hakuri. Even though he wasn't sure, when he remembered how Hakuri had said the katana suited him, it gave him confidence to let go. While speaking, he closed his eyes and concentrated. He tried to connect with his blade and saw a vision of it before him. He gradually reached for the blade in his vision, while a small goldfish could be seen swimming out of Enten, inside the storehouse. Chihiro opened one eye and said he realized that whatever happened, that blade would still be his. Shiba then asked if he had done it. Chihiro added that Hakuri had provided general information, but using reconnaissance abilities, they could ask more specific questions, and he was the only one who could answer them. Therefore, they were counting on him. Hakuri was encouraged when he heard this and said he understood. Because of this, Shiba figured out that their plan was to find a way to infiltrate the storehouse. Chihiro suddenly became concerned when he saw Kyura was inside the storehouse. He could enter there too, apparently. Kyura looked at Enten while Chihiro was still concentrating. The goldfish moved away and hid before Kyura approached the seventh blade. It seemed like he had seen something, so he observed the sword. In his mind, he couldn't imagine that Chihiro Rokuhira would just give up that blade without a plan at the very least. Kyura recalled what happened, and thought that it wasn't hopelessness he saw in Chihiro's eyes when he left his blade. But he felt that a business deal without risk was boring. In truth, he was looking forward to his next move. If Kyura could protect those enchanted blades until the auction, then he would win. So, he just said bring it on. Chihiro opened his eyes and remained serious. Elsewhere, someone noticed how unusually calm things were. Two men were talking and said that usually, there would be dumbass causing trouble there who would get killed by security. But the other one replied that everyone's on edge, especially since two enchanted blades were up for auction. The masked one emphasized that those blades were the headliners, so the enchanted blades wouldn't be shown until after dark. There was no point in being tense this early. However, the guy wasn't convinced that everything would remain this calm. He was sure there would be chaos that night. November 8th had arrived, and there were already many cars outside for the Rakuzaichi auction. The auction venue was already crowded with people. With just a few minutes before the event's start, Kyura was asked about how the preparations were going. He thought about how 5 days had passed since Oniii-Chan was submitted, but nothing had happened yet. Whatever they were planning, he was ready. Outside, a man wearing sunglasses remarked that security at Rakuzaichi remained more or less the same every year. The event attendees were underworld bigwigs, accompanied by their henchmen and sorcerers they employ as bodyguards. Only 3 members from each party were allowed to enter the lower level. Those who remained behind patrolled the area together, regardless of their status. This was apparently a long-standing tradition and rule of the Sazanami clan. Meanwhile, the Sazanami clan sorcerers were responsible for underground security. The man wearing sunglasses held a paper and mentioned that only one thing was different this year. He told the man beside him to look at the leaflet distributed to them. According to management, there was a high possibility that Oniii-Chan's owner, Chihiro Rokuhira, would appear there. Chihiro's picture was on the leaflet, along with a 50 million yen reward for whoever could kill him. When the man asked about the paper, he explained it was being distributed at the entrance. He was surprised because he had lost his copy. He thought that if the boy was killed that night, the sword's eternal contract would be broken and Oniii-Chan would become wieldable. If that happened, its price would surely increase even more. "We'll see," responded the man in sunglasses. Every year, on the day of Rakuzaichi, that city would fall asleep. In that den full of yakuza and sorcerers, many kinds of evil occurred. That's why everyone looked the other way. People prioritized their lives. Nobody approached the auction hall, so they hardly had anything to do there. He didn't know how Oniii-Chan ended up in the Sazanami's hands, but it meant its owner was unarmed. Therefore, it would be impossible for him to show up. And even if he did come, what could happen? Nothing, because no one could do anything about it. A child could then be seen walking along a quiet street without any cars. He wrote in what appeared to be his diary for November 8th that his name was Mr. Inazuma. He would bring down the thunder of justice upon evil. In a flashback, the child's older sister was shown calling him you. She laughed and asked if he was scared and told him not to worry because she would protect him. Back in the present, he added in his diary that he wasn't afraid of anything anymore. On that day, he would prove he was a hero who would stand up against the den of evil. He had gone to the auction venue, seemingly with plans for what to do inside. He walked straight through the gate, and a guard radioed others to be alert because there was an invader. Inside, numerous guards were holding swords. Someone noticed the child and asked what he was doing there. The person radioed the guards to do their job, calling them slackers. You asked him to move aside and called him a bad guy. Because of this, he grabbed him by the throat. The guard said he hated children most of all, snotty brats who thought they were big stuff. While still holding you by the neck, he asked why he had come there. You couldn't help but cry as he mentioned his sister. He begged them to let her go. The guard was surprised by what he said and asked if his sister was up for auction, which the child confirmed. The guard told him to come back with piles of money. He offered that for 500,000. He would show him who would buy his sister. You continued sobbing, remembering when his sister told him to just trust her. You then pulled out a small blade hidden behind him and stabbed it into the forearm of the guard who was choking him. Another guard who saw this cheered, while the stabbed guard became angry. You demanded that the guard release him and free his sister. He trembled in fear when the man called another guard, saying that after he disposed of the child, he would be next. Outside, the guards at the gate were lying on the ground, attacked, and someone was asking over the radio if they could hear him. A man arrived outside the auction hall, which the sunglasses-wearing person noticed. He noted the scar on his face, but the man beside him replied that he should look carefully because it didn't match the leaflet as this man got both arms. The sunglasses-wearing man conceded while the man reached for a watch in his pocket. It was Shiba, who thought it was still a bit early. He believed he was moving because of the commotion happening below. He left the balcony, and when the sunglasses-wearing man asked where he was going, Shiba answered that he would turn off the lights to help Chihiro. The man asked who he was talking about, but Shiba just said later and thanked him for the information. Looking down below, Shiba saw guards surrounding a child who was being choked. He became concerned when he saw how furious the guard was about being stabbed by the child. The guard asked the boy if he knew what he was doing, to which he replied, "Of course he does." Another flashback showed the night when he was terrified of lightning, where his sister assured him that lightning never strikes good children. She said that's what the sky uses to punish bad guys, so he shouldn't worry. Back in the present, the boy was determined to save his sister. He introduced himself as Mr. Inazuma, saying he rained down the thunder of justice. The other guards around them laughed at his words. The guard he had stabbed had enough of him, and with his knife, moved to attack him. However, the guard's arm was suddenly severed, and someone rescued the boy. Yu was surprised when this person congratulated him with a "well done." When addressed as just Inazuma, Yu corrected him, saying it's Mr. Inazuma. The guards noticed the person's scar, and that's when they realized he was Chihiro Rokuhira. Chihiro told the boy that he would take over from there. Suddenly, the lights went out and the chandelier fell. The guards became alarmed because the man they were ordered to capture was now there. They became frenzied over the 50 million yen reward. They were pleased because he was only using a regular sword and had no enchanted blade. Meanwhile, with just minutes remaining before the auction, Kyura prepared to go on stage. In a flashback to when they were still in the car, Chihiro told Shiba that he would handle the riffraff. Shiba asked if he was sure about this. In Chihiro's mind, there was no time to be wishy-washy. He had long decided to take on this responsibility. Back at the present, he mentioned Kuragumo or Cloud Gouger and activated it before saying May. It could be seen that he carried two swords, with one unleashing a lightning bolt. At exactly 12 o'clock, the 208th Rakuzaichi auction began. This is the moment Chihiro and his companions planned to start their operation. Flashing back to their discussion about the storehouse recon log on November 4th, Chihiro mentioned it was more exhausting than he had expected. It might have been because Enten was in subspace, making it difficult to maintain a long connection. Shiba advised him to take it slowly. When asked if he was sure it was in subspace, Chihiro confirmed it. The way the storehouse was structured, he explained, meant it couldn't physically exist in their world. It extended infinitely upward and downward. They were having this conversation in a park, and while Char and the others were playing, Shiba said that if the storehouse existed in their world, he would just jump in there and take the enchanted blade. But now, Chihiro had a question because of what Kyura mentioned about their clan leadership's unbroken lineage. Because of this, he called Hakuri, who left playing with Char, to approach him. He asked if Hakuri had ever witnessed a leadership transfer in the Sazanami clan, and if his father had been the boss since Hakuri was born. Hakuri replied that his grandfather retired due to illness, so his father took over as the new boss. Chihiro was wondering how access to the storehouse was passed down. Hakuri thought carefully before answering that it was done through a ceremony. When Chihiro asked if he remembered what happened there, Hakuri said it was a long time ago. But from what he recalled, it was performed in an underground cemetery. The Sazanami clan cemetery apparently held sacred power. Hakuri tried hard to remember what kind of ceremony it was. He said there were only 2 people there, so he wasn't present. Because of this, Shiba thought they needed to figure out how to perform the ceremony to force the power transfer to Hakuri. They were unsure about this plan. Chihiro thought that if they needed to perform a ceremony to pass control of the storehouse to a new boss, then they were wrong about the insurance. The boss position wasn't automatically transferred when the current one died. It seemed Kyura was telling the truth about the storehouse disappearing if he died. Fast forward to November 6th, Shiba was puzzled when Chihiro told him about a door he saw in the storehouse. There were no walls or separate rooms, just a door. Char and others were eating ice cream outside while they talked in the car. Shiba thought the door might be an auction item, which Chihiro considered. But generally, auction items were encased. Besides the door, the only other things not in cases were weapons that looked like they were used in fighting. They found this weird, and Shiba suggested there might be a way in and out from the outside world. Chihiro added that he had seen people entering and leaving that storehouse a few times. These people would give food to those imprisoned there, and then vanish like bubbles. None of them used that door because they could teleport into the storehouse from anywhere. While writing down details about the storehouse, Chihiro mentioned there was a contradiction between the door and the storehouse's function. Shiba noted that even weirder was a door that nobody used. Chihiro suggested it might be an emergency door. For example, if Kyura was lying about the storehouse suddenly disappearing when he died, but what actually disappeared was access to the storehouse from their world. Shiba added that this way, if the boss died, the storehouse could continue existing, but no one could access it. Chihiro thought the door was for emergency access, just to retrieve items if something happened. Shiba responded that whatever its function, if there was such a door in their world, this theory will get way more convincing. Chihiro then called Hakuri, who was eating outside, and he ran over to him. Chihiro drew the door he saw in his notebook and showed it to Hakuri. He asked if he had seen this door before, but he wasn't sure. Chihiro didn't pressure him. Shiba mentioned that given even close family members of the Sazanami didn't know the workings of the storehouse, even if there was a door, it would surely be highly classified information. Hakuri stared at the drawing and thought about it. After a moment, he mentioned something about the crest. Back in the present, when the chandelier fell at the entrance, the noise was heard in the auction hall. People whispered among themselves, wondering where the sound came from. Meanwhile, Kyura figured out that Chihiro was there, which meant he had learned about the emergency access door. That was the storehouse's insurance, and the only way to breach it. The door they were looking for was then shown. The entrance was above, while the auction venue was below. Their target was on an even lower level. The path to the lowest level of Rakuzaichi, where the chest was located, was securely locked. The emergency access location was found inside the Nagino-Joan, or the Sazanami clan's underground cemetery. Because of these events, people at the venue discussed that Chihiro Rokuhira was already inside. Some attendees sent their guards to find him, telling them not to let the 50 million yen bounty slip away. While Kyura knew Chihiro was on the move, he was happy he came. He thought that if Chihiro died, Enten's price would rise even higher than Shinichi's. Kyura thought that Chihiro wasn't the seller. Enten had changed hands when he traded it for Hakuri. Therefore, he could target Chihiro's life without guilt. He then spoke up and called everyone's attention. Meanwhile outside, Hakuri was anxious inside their car. Shiba suddenly entered, carrying you. He asked Hinao to watch over the boy. Meanwhile, he asked if Hakuri was ready, and Hakuri said yes. It was time for them to enter. First, Chihiro would enter through the front door. Flashing back again, someone had asked if it would still work even though it was ruined. They were referring to the cloud gouger. Chihiro said he thought it was almost at its limit, down to just embers. A few more moves and the cloud gouger would surely be finished. Back at the entrance, Chihiro placed the handle of the broken cloud gouger in his mouth and activated Mei. Because of this, his body was enveloped in lightning. Though it was dark, the guards noticed his lightning and became alarmed. But they didn't care about that, all equally determined to kill him. Using his other sword as his main weapon, he split the bodies of groups of guards there. The remaining guards were shocked when he suddenly vanished. He was incredibly fast, they said, but one guard calmed them down and told them to target the light source. The glowing broken cloud gouger was in the air, and one guard was surprised to see it. It was too late when he realized Chihiro was behind him, preparing to behead him. After targeting him, Chihiro caught the cloud gouger again, and many dead guards could be seen in the area. The chandelier was suddenly fixed, and there were people riding on it. When the lights came on, they noticed Chihiro throwing his weapon as bait. One of them remarked how skillful he was. They jumped down while the wall behind suddenly exploded, sending several guards flying. Hiyuki was responsible for this and casually greeted Chihiro, who only glanced at her because of what she had done. While this was happening, let's move to the auction room, where two members of the Kaminabi Shinichi bidding team were talking. The female member commented that she was feeling nervous, which prompted her male companion to ask why, since their job was supposed to be simple. They didn't expect the event organizers to put the Enten up for auction, but they said that wouldn't change anything, and they would still purchase the Shinichi. The woman agreed but reasoned that people were being sold in this place, so she asked how they could just ignore that. The man explained that in their cesspool of a world, they couldn't fix everything, so they needed to choose what they could protect. But it seemed the woman didn't know about the power of Shinichi yet. so he told her to think about it this way. By buying the Shinu-chi at this auction, they would save millions of lives. After that, we returned to Chihiro's situation, where the guards on the chandelier wondered who Hiyuki was and speculated that she might be Chihiro's friend, but they also noticed the weapon on her arm. Meanwhile, Chihiro recalled his conversation with Shiba before executing their plan, where the latter asked why he wanted to draw attention from the crowd when they could use his sorcery to teleport past the guards and go straight underground. Chihiro responded that at any rate, they would still need to face security somewhere, and Hiyuki's flame bone would be their biggest challenge, so he wanted to get it over with. Back to the present. One of the elite guards with ugly teeth shouted that they were making their move, and it seemed like they were going to destroy each other. Hiyuki began charging at the other guards and, using the flame bone, easily incinerated them as if burning paper, while Chihiro was slicing through the guards with extraordinary speed using his katana and the broken cloud gouger like butter. Before long, the two faced each other again, and while they exchanged serious glances, Chihiro commented that they needed to talk, to which Hiyuki responded that she should be the one saying that while calling him a bastard. On the other side, Tefuku was choking a guard while asking Chihiro if what he was holding was the cloud gouger, and it seemed it was indeed broken but still functioning. Chihiro looked at him and, while nodding, commented in his thoughts that, like before, Tefuku had created a space sealed off from the regular world. Tefuku nodded back as a form of masculine greeting, and while this was happening, the other guards in the regular world were shocked by Chihiro's sudden disappearance from their sight. Inside the sealed-off world, Hiyuki said that Chihiro had made the situation more complicated, because now that the enemies had the Inten, they couldn't let him die, and they needed to protect him. Chihiro recalled again his conversation with Shiba, where the latter asked if by get it over with it meant he wanted to fight Hiyuki, to which he said no and explained that they could use this situation to their advantage, and they would negotiate. Chihiro then questioned the idea that he would be protected and asked why she didn't mean they would arrest him, so she explained that it depended on him what they would do. If he resisted and prolonged the issue, they would be forced to arrest him. Hiyuki suddenly thought and asked why Chihiro decided to give the Inten to the Sazanami. So he explained that the Sazanami had a special storehouse, and he needed to know where it was and how to get in, and his plan worked. If they were trying to get the Shinu-chi from them, they would need his information. Because of this, Hiyuki asked if he meant he wanted to team up, and if so, that wouldn't be necessary because Kaminabi would buy the Shinu-chi, while Tefuku tried to get her attention. Chihiro noticed Hiyuki's straightforwardness, and because of that, he thought to point out that they surely knew they were also selling humans in this place. He then pointed out that there was a kid there earlier, who was the little brother of someone being sold that day, and that child was screaming for them to return his big sister. He then pointed that does this mean that Kaminabi's desire was to protect him, and let the Sazanami continue the Rakuzaichi, and afterward, they would get the Shinu-chi and the Inten would become unusable, to which Hiyuki agreed and said his statement was exact. Tefuku commented in his thoughts that this was the part that Hiyuki refused to support, and she fought fiercely against the higher-ups until the last moment. Nevertheless, Hiyuki knew she commanded powers on par with an enchanted blade, and the importance of taking this assignment. He also recalled what she said while fighting Chihiro before, and he agreed with that, but Tefuku also knew she wasn't that cold-hearted, that she wasn't truly okay with what was happening inside the Rakuzaichi. Chihiro asked Hiyuki if she really wanted to leave behind the child he mentioned who was crying while he gave money to the thugs to achieve their goal. He asked if she would really abandon the innocent people right in front of her for the greater good, and if it was really okay to sell people like objects. Hiyuki stomped her foot forcefully and declared that Chihiro's attempt to win her over was pointless and he wouldn't get the Shinu-chi. Because of this, Chihiro stared at her, while she recalled their past conversations about what held more weight in their actions, and before long, she irritably said that she knew that. She became annoyed with Chihiro and the higher-ups, and told Tefuku to stop choking the guard and forget about all of this, which confused Tefuku. She explained that she was sick of picking their battles. The enchanted blades, the Rakuzaichi, Chihiro, so she just decided she would destroy everything. This puzzled both Tefuku and Chihiro, and they looked at her. Tefuku asked Chihiro if he had a plan to get the Shinu-chi, to which he agreed. Tefuku explained that in his opinion, Their plan was probably to kill him after retrieving the Inten and the Shinuchi, at which Chihiro asked if that was okay with him. So Tofuku explained that if he let Hiyuki kill him after he got the enchanted blades, he wouldn't get in trouble with the higher-ups. Chihiro thanked him for this, and Tofuku released the guard and told him to run. They immediately returned to the regular world, where Chihiro and Hiyuki quickly charged at the guards surrounding them, while Tofuku also beat up some guards there. Chihiro was slicing through the enemies surrounding him, while others shouted for him to come back and that they would catch him. On the other side, Hiyuki didn't fall behind in showing her strength and burned countless guards using her flame bone. Chihiro continued running towards the storehouse, while Hiyuki prevented the enemies from getting close to him, commenting that they wouldn't be able to catch Chihiro. After that, let's return briefly to what Shiba told Chihiro about going ahead to the underground to handle some individuals he addressed as them. The Toe, the special forces of the Sazanami clan boss, were shown to us, and they were usually stationed at the four corners of the stage during the Rakuzaichi. Next, it was explained that there were always intruders at this event, but they had never disrupted the Rakuzaichi, and it was said to be a spectacle every year. However, at present, these four weren't at the four corners of the ongoing Rakuzaichi, so some participants wondered if it was really okay to have no guards this year, and why they weren't there. Let's move to the lowest floor of the Rakuzaichi entryway, leading to the Najino-Joan. It turns out that Kyura had instructed the Toe to protect the graveyard, even though it would make him busier at the stage by himself. Because of this, one of the Toe members with bangs asked why they were guarding this area this year. So another member with brushed-up bangs explained that the graveyard was the only way for outsiders to access the storehouse, to which the one with bangs agreed. However, in the entire Sazanami clan, they were the only ones who knew about this besides their father, so it usually wasn't heavily guarded. In other words, added the one with brushed-up bangs, there was a risk this year that someone else knew about it, at which point Soya interjected asking if he meant Chihiro Rokuhira. He explained that Hakuri was with him, and even though he didn't know about the door, he had information about them. He wondered what if he could use the Inten to sense within the storehouse, and maybe he could put the pieces together because of that. But in any case, he said, their father must suspect that Chihiro knows about the door, and in fact, he might even have let him find out on purpose. The one with bangs asked why then their father hadn't told them that Chihiro might show up there, to which Soya replied that it wasn't that hard to figure out. The one with braids reasoned that their father was bent out of shape because he used Hakuri as a bargaining chip, and the clear instructions were meant to tell them not to overthink things, adding that Chihiro might bring others along, but so long as they protect this place from outsiders, they're good, which the one with brushed-up bangs understood. After that, he said that apparently, Chihiro had shown up at the entrance, so the one with bangs asked if that meant Hakuri was here too, to which he responded that he doubted it, and he wouldn't come because he was a useless coward. They just needed to watch out for the long-haired guy because he could show up anytime, at which the one with bangs asked if he meant the guy who could teleport. While they were talking, Soya just stared at the entrance leading to their position. Let's return briefly to a point in time where Hakuri was telling Shiba that according to their father, his big brother Soya was smarter than him, to which Shiba, remembering what he saw in their fight, commented that it must be a lie. Hakuri explained that he still hadn't seen that side of his brother before, and he also told Shiba what his weakness was. When we returned to the present, Soya saw Hakuri peek from the entrance of their room. When their eyes met, Hakuri quickly ran up the floor, while Soya immediately followed him, surprising his companions. Soya shouted asking why Hakuri was running, but he just kept running. The one with bangs wondered if Hakuri really had come, so the one with brushed-up bangs explained that if Soya was that worked up, then it must be true. He also realized that if Hakuri was here, then the long-haired guy they were watching for was here too, and it turned out he was right when that person appeared behind them and commented that he couldn't enter the graveyard. He asked them how to open the door while thanking Hakuri. It was shown that Hakuri had actually suggested this plan to Shiba and Chihiro, for which Shiba praised him. Chihiro said at this time that he would also go straight to the underground, so when Hakuri runs to the surface, they could meet there to leave Soya to him. We return to the present where Hakuri continues running while being chased by Soya, who keeps asking where he's going. In Hakuri's mind, He was happy because Shiba praised him and they gave him a job, so he pushed himself that he's got to do this. Before long, in the right hallway where Hakuri was running, Chihiro arrived and shouted at him to continue running towards him. Hakuri smiled at this and was amazed at how quickly he had gotten past the entrance, while his brother continued shouting, asking why he was running away from him. Chihiro quickly took down the guards blocking the path between him and Hakuri, while Hakuri seemed to notice something as he watched Chihiro. When Hakuri was about to reach him, the floor suddenly bulged and thick roots emerged, and in an instant, they were blocked by a massive wall of trees. Because of this, Soya caught up to Hakuri and happily asked if it was true that he came to see him, to which Hakuri shouted no. Hakuri was very confused about what happened, and he thought that maybe the sorcerer he noticed earlier was responsible for this because it seemed Chihiro was also facing a difficult battle there. He started to panic and think about what to do because they hadn't planned for this situation. He recalled what Shiba said about returning to him if he thought he couldn't meet up with Chihiro and he would handle the rest, but he questioned this and said that if he did that, there would be no point in him coming here, and Shiba's situation downstairs would become 4 against 1. He contemplated whether to buy time by letting Soya beat him up until Chihiro arrived, but he also thought that the enemy was stronger than Chihiro expected, so it would be a long fight. However, he knew that either way, they wouldn't blame him. Soya continued pestering him, asking if Chihiro and his companions had ordered him to say that and saying he would kill them, while adding that they would still care about even a worthless loser like him because they were nice people. He also remembered his pet praying mantis named Samurai, and it asked him if that was really okay with him, explaining that just because someone's nice, you don't take advantage of them. Hakuri thought about this and told himself that if he wanted to be useful, he needed to do what he was thinking. Soon after, Hakuri swatted away Soya's hand and told him to let go of him while calling him a jerk, which confused him. He faced him and prepared to fight, as a strange aura began emanating from his left eye, and he seriously told Soya that he was here to defeat him. While this was happening, let's return to 32 seconds in the past. Chihiro saw Hakuri approaching him, but there were several guards blocking the way, so he prepared to take them down while thinking that a few had slipped through. He put the broken cloud gouger in his mouth, and in an instant, he quickly sliced through the bodies of several guards there. However, there was one individual who matched his attack and deflected it, and as a follow-up, he tried to throw his short sword and ducked. He brought the thrown sword close to his hand, and because of that, he managed to hit the man in the face, but the man managed to counter with a sneaky kick, causing him to step back. After that, the man suddenly commented that the cloud gouger didn't seem as powerful as before now that it was broken. When Hakuri was about to reach him, this was the moment when the thick tree wall began emerging from the ground, and while Chihiro stared at the man, he noticed the mark on his right hand, and he began having flashbacks to the time of his father's death. He was completely separated from Hakuri, and when he turned to look at the man, he carefully examined the mark of the man facing him. After that, we were shown the appearance of this man, who had an earring on each ear and line tattoos on both eyes. He commented that Chihiro had really grown up, and when Chihiro saw the mark on the man's hand up close, it seemed to bring a tremendous surge of emotions in him, and he remembered the horrific scene of his father Kunishige's death at the hands of people who had the same mark on their hands as the man in front of him. In a flash, Chihiro pinned the man against a wall and held his short sword to his neck. He recalled the information he heard about the reactivation of a small group of elite sorcerers who killed his father for 4 years now, and he questioned himself about what this man meant by saying he had grown up when he wasn't even in the scene, but he was one of them, which made him wonder how many members there were. He shouted, asking if he was a member of Hishaku, what he was after, and why he was here. The man responded that he was surprised Chihiro could maintain his composure enough to interrogate him now. The man introduced himself as the leader of Hishaku and said he was responsible for his father's murder. Shock was visible on Chihiro's face when he heard this, and the man commented that he only speaks when he wants to. He told him to stop this pointless nonsense and just try to kill him, slowly pushing away Chihiro's short sword with 2 fingers while saying this. After that, he suddenly punched Chihiro in the chin, which startled him. Just as Chihiro was returning his gaze to the Hishaku leader, the man had quickly moved behind him, causing him to comment on his speed. The man tried to kick him from behind, but Chihiro managed to dodge it and attempted to counter with the Cloud Gouger. However, when the man's foot landed on the wall, he used that footing to stop Chihiro's swinging arm. As a counter, he delivered a back kick to Chihiro that sent him flying toward the wall of trees. After that, the man stared at him, while he was still leaning against the wall and thinking that this was the leader of Hishaku. Several roots began emerging from the wall of trees and embraced Chihiro's body, while the man explained that there was less output compared to before and asked if it was because it was losing power due to being broken, or perhaps because Chihiro had started using it. He answered his own question and said no, it was probably both reasons. Chihiro was amazed because this man had put everything into consideration without using magic, and he remarked how strong he was. The man added that at Chihiro's current level, it would be difficult for him to escape from there. He told him not to move as they were going to auction their items, and they didn't want anyone causing trouble there today. The man silenced Chihiro and said that the auction was beginning. After that, we moved to the auction hall, where Kura began speaking, saying that before starting the auction, they would let the audience see their special item for today. He explained that 18 years ago, Japan fell into a crisis when they were attacked by enemies and the Seitei War began. Despite gathering sorcerers from various parts of Japan, they were still at a disadvantage until the hero Kunishiga Rokuhara arrived and changed everything. In the basement, Chihiro questioned why they would put the Shinichi up for auction, and while asking this, he wondered what this man was after, what he was planning with the enchanted blades, where the other swords were, how many members his group had, if he knew about him, and why he was here. After that, he asked the man what he was after, while thinking of countless other questions like why Sojo had the Cloud Gouger, why the Shinichi, what his goal was, and why they were interested in the enchanted blades. Chihiro couldn't contain his emotions any longer, and soon he remembered the goldfish he had with his father and how they bonded, causing him to cry out and ask why this man had killed his father. Let's return briefly to the auction hall, where Kura was explaining that the 5 enchanted blades forged by Kunishige turned the tide of the war, and the 6th brought their country to victory. He said that perhaps some of those present today had witnessed the overwhelming strength of this weapon in battle. After that, we returned to Chihiro, where the man explained that the answer to his question was also a declaration of war. Upstairs, Kura had already shown the enchanted blade known as the Shinichi, and tonight, after 18 years, this masterpiece would be unleashed once again. The answer to Chihiro's question was that this man had done all of this to wield the Shinichi. Putting it in the auction was part of his plan, which was why they had been helping the Sazanami clan frequently in recent times. They needed to ensure that the Rakuzaichi would continue without a hitch. We were shown Hakuri's situation while fighting Soya, as well as Shiba while facing the 3 other members of the Toe. Chihiro was puzzled by the man's explanation about helping the Sazanami clan, and he wondered how auctioning the Shinichi would let him wield its power, and even if he does eventually gain control, what does he want with it? He remembered waves on a beach, and commented that there was no point in thinking about that and the details weren't important. He said that everything they had done so far, the Hishaku and the Sazanami clan, was crooked, so he couldn't let this happen. He struggled against the roots, embracing him while shouting that they won't get away with this. The man suddenly placed 2 fingers against his forehead and said that he didn't seem to understand, explaining that the enchanted blades don't choose people, but rather anyone can enslave them, to which Chihiro responded that this only added to the reasons to stop him. He asked why the man hadn't killed him yet, so the man said he was still too unripe to harvest. He said Chihiro was relying on the Cloud Gouger, but it wasn't as threatening anymore. No matter how much he tried to fight, his situation would only get worse. He said there was nothing Chihiro could do about this, so he suggested to take their time and have a little chat. Chihiro was puzzled by this, so the man asked if that was okay with him. He said he was curious about what would grow from the seeds of hatred he had planted many years ago. Chihiro's eyes widened when he heard this, and the man added that the Rakuzaichi auction was just beginning, so they had plenty of time there. He said he wouldn't bore him because he had many stories to tell him. For example, about what happened when his father died, but Chihiro immediately cut him off and told him to be quiet, saying he would pay for this. He remembered the time his father showed him the enchanted blades, and his words about needing to stop them while remembering Hyuki, the Hishaka leader, Kyura, and Sojo. Also their conversation about how special those blades were to them. He tightened his grip on the Cloud Gouger and contradicted the man's statement that anyone could enslave the enchanted blades and that the Cloud Gouger was weak because he had just started to use it. It was shown here how he had taken care of the enchanted blades case with his father, and he said that since then, he had been by its side, and he would never let it die like this. The Cloud Gouger began to crackle, and the man noticed it. An intense aura enveloped Chihiro's body at this point, and while casting Mei Shred, he was saying that this sword would die as his, by his side. Black lightning began emanating from Chihiro as he cast this, and the man noticed it while commenting that it seemed he got his breath back. It was explained to us here that the Cloud Gouger, in solidarity with Chihiro who was on the brink of death, strained itself to serve its master, releasing lightning beyond its limits. A large portion of the wall of trees embracing Chihiro was destroyed in an instant, and the man's right hand was suddenly severed due to Chihiro's attack. After his hand was cut off, the man caught it, and while Chihiro was still positioned behind him, he threw his severed hand at him, forcing Chihiro to raise his left hand to block it, which gave the man an opening to target him from behind. However, due to Chihiro's extraordinary speed at this moment, he easily dodged the man's axe kick, and as a counter, he quickly rushed in and stabbed him in the left shoulder with his short sword. While Chihiro's sword was still embedded, the man spat blood into his eyes, making him realize that he had deliberately taken the hit to do this. The man tried to reach for him as a follow-up, so he was forced to retreat first. He commented that Chihiro's speed and attack power were on a different level, and he had to do that just to keep up, which was amazing. Chihiro said in his mind how much physical and psychological strength this man must have to sacrifice his body with such a level head, absorbing the sorcery, so he decided that if he was going to kill him, he couldn't hold back. Chihiro looked at the wall of trees and thought he had made a deep hole, but realized just how thick that wall actually was. The roots he had pierced in the wall began growing again, which made him comment on how quickly it recovered, and realized that if he wanted to destroy it, he would need to do it with one blow using his full strength. After that, it was explained here that there were only 3 attempts left, and by getting in touch with its deepest levels, Chihiro could clearly feel Cloud Gouger's impending demise, but it raised the question of how he would use these charges. Chihiro's head began throbbing from the strain, so he calmed himself down. The man hadn't used his sorcery in their fight yet, so he thought either he was busy controlling the wall tree, or maybe he was hiding something, but in any case, he had no idea what he was capable of. His goal was to confine him, and he would want Chihiro to keep using Cloud Gouger's power while doing nothing to him. Moreover, he was concerned about Shiba and Hakuri, so what he needed to do most was hurry. He remembered the child called Mr. Inazuma, and Hakuri's words about wanting to eradicate the loathsome event that was the Rakuzaichi, and this was interrupted when the man suddenly asked him what the problem was, and if he wanted to continue. In Chihiro's mind, he said he couldn't hesitate, while remembering his father's appearance when he died, and black lightning began emanating from his body again as he said he would kill this man. On the other side, let's move to Hakuri, where he tried to use his Esau against Soya. But unfortunately, it wasn't working, so Soya just strangled him while he thought about how his attack had misfired again. Soya irritably told him that he was on edge here, and he couldn't accept what he said about defeating him. Soya threw him while asking what he thought he could do here, and as a follow-up quickly kicked him in the body. He spat blood because of this, and Soya shouted for him to accept it and asked if he could see what he was saying. The only thing he knew how to do was curl up into a ball, to which he agreed in his mind, calling himself weak. He noticed black lightning coming from the other side of the wall tree beside him while Soya was telling him that he knew that, and that's just who he was. It was shown here that this was the time Chihiro first used Mei Shred when he saw this lightning. He thought these came from Chihiro, but Soya hadn't realized it. He was trying to penetrate the wall and come here, and this is when he realized that their goal was underground. Soya continued kicking him in the body while asking what had gotten into him and if it was because of Chihiro that he was acting this way. In his mind, he said that Chihiro needed lightning to destroy the wall, and perhaps he was just warming up and the next one would be stronger. His brother angrily asked him how this would work and told him to open his eyes, because Chihiro was just using him to achieve his goal. However, he still believed in Chihiro and anticipated that his powerful attack to destroy the wall was coming. His brother continued crying like a madman while saying that when push comes to shove, Chihiro would abandon him and put himself first, but Soya said he wasn't like that and he loved Hakuri unconditionally, to which Hakuri shouted for him to be quiet, saying that wasn't Chihiro's character. After that, Hakuri thought about what he needed to do here, and we suddenly returned to a point in time where Shiba was telling him that he could use Esau. He was confused at first, so Shiba explained that they needed to start by reviewing spirit energy. Sorcery, he explained, is made up of spirit energy, and that energy lies dormant within every person, and sorcerers train to control it and increase their capacity. There are more benefits to refining his abilities than just being able to use sorcery, because it strengthens his body too. By skillfully circulating spirit energy in his body, he can obtain superhuman mobility and defensive capabilities, and beyond that, there's sorcery. In other words, Chihiro said, in order to use sorcery, you need a strong body. Shiba added that while it wasn't at full strength, he had taken an Inkatsu to the face and survived, to which Hakuri said he had passed out. So Shiba pointed out that most people who would take that would have died. He said he didn't know what kind of training Hakuri had done before at Sazanami, but if you asked him, spirit energy was already flowing through his body and it was ready to use sorcery. Hakuri remembered his training at home and explained that in their family, they started learning to use spirit energy at 8 years old, and at 11, they would learn Esau. But when he turned 12, he couldn't do what others could do at 8, and after that, he wasn't allowed to train anymore. We were shown here what kind of beating he experienced during those training days. Shiba said he understood this, and perhaps he had developed it naturally for self-defense. He said 12 was too young to know that, and that was the downside of elite families. After that, Shiba also told him that he had an aptitude for sorcery. When he was about to ask why he was like this then, Shiba answered that it was because of his feelings. He said it sounds simple, but habits are hard to break. He grew up in that environment and was treated differently from everyone else. He believed he couldn't do anything, and unconsciously, he had built up barriers. Hakuri thought carefully about the reminders Shiba had given him, and Chihiro added not to think about it too much, saying they would get there. We returned to the present, where he continued believing Chihiro would come, while Soya kept repeating that he couldn't do anything there, but he still contradicted this in his mind. He remembered what Chihiro said about this being the last year of Rakuzaichi, and that they would end it together. Hakuri positioned himself again, as if to cast Esau, which made Soya comment that he had already told him he couldn't do it. However, to Soya's surprise, Hakuri suddenly managed to release his Esau, and it hit his body solidly, pressing him against the wall tree. The shock was visible on Soya's face when he managed to release it, while he was telling himself that he was weak, but there was a but. Adding to Soya's surprise, he said that all Hakuri did was push him using his cute little shock waves. Hakuri suddenly ran to the side, and Soya sensed something behind him. Chihiro explained in his mind that it was okay if he couldn't use Cloud Gouger many times anymore, and he would just release its power in one go. Chihiro penetrated through from the other side of the wall tree, and managed to slash Soya in the back using Cloud Gouger and his short sword. He immediately shouted to Hakuri that they needed to hurry downstairs, to which Hakuri responded with a smile that he understood. The Hishaku leader commented that Chihiro had exceeded his expectations and was very level-headed after all. While he was saying this, a person with a burning arm appeared behind him. Chihiro shouted at Hakuri to hurry there, and he agreed while Soya was still down. He explained that they would go straight to the door, while Hakuri asked him if he had defeated the man on the other side, to which he answered no. The hole Chihiro made in the wall tree had completely closed again, while the man just stared at it. Hiyuki arrived at the scene with her flame bone and teasingly asked the man if he was rejected and if he wanted her to comfort him. While this was happening, in Tofuku's situation, he and Hiyuki had managed to defeat all the guards upstairs before she went down. The man answered Hiyuki's question with a no, and while remembering Chihiro's words about killing him and promising it, he said he felt fully satisfied. He added while remembering his conversation with Kyura that the Sazanami were risking their lives today to protect the integrity of the Rakuzaichi, so the rest is up to them. The man put his hands together as if performing ninjutsu, and Hiyuki noticed the mark on his hand, which seemed familiar to her, and she called it an emblem. Right in front of her, the man vanished, and several Sazanami subordinates suddenly arrived, and they noticed the inkatsu on her arm, making one of them realize she was a member of Kaminabi. They asked her if she was really going to fight them because they thought they were more conservative than this. Hiyuki answered that she wasn't like that while thinking these weren't the Sazanami To members Tofuku told her about because their uniforms looked different. However, she noted they came from a brilliant lineage with consistent proficiency. One of the men said he didn't care if she worked for the government, and anyone who disturbed the Rakuzaichi would die, and they prepared to use sorcery. On the other side, in the auction hall, the bidder's excitement was visible for the items Kyura was showing, and while he was auctioning a human, he explained that the Rakuzaichi drives its clients into a frenzy. They deliver products with the highest value, so they should come to this event. After that, we went to a flashback where Kyura was talking to young Hakuri, and it turns out that the other kid was Tenri. He told these two that they, the Sazanami, rule that passion and value for the people, and they stand at the very top. Tenri questioned about them being at the very top, so Kyura agreed and explained that he and Hakuri are special. The current Rakuzaichi was shown again, and here the eagerness of the bidders to acquire a woman was clearly visible. We returned to the flashback, where Hakuri and Tenri believed they were special, and Kyura added that was why they needed to be strong. Only the Sazanami clan possessed the privilege to stand on the stage they stood on now, and no one was permitted to trespass upon it. And throughout history, no one had violated that zone because the To, the elite forces of the Sazanami clan, had protected that tradition over the years, and that was proof they were special, to which young Tenri commented cool during these times. After that, we returned to the present where Shiba was lighting a cigarette. After lighting it, he held it to the eye of the pinned-down Tenri while asking how to open the door behind them. He told him to answer it because if not, his eye would become an ashtray. It turns out Shiba had already defeated the 3 To members using his strength, and while his companions were down, the man with braids thought he wasn't just a simple teleporter, and also wondered who he was. Shiba pointed out to them weren't they supposed to be the strongest in Sazanami, and now they had no more trump cards, so this perverted festival was over. This Shiba was too strong, the braided one said in his mind, and before long, he agreed to tell him how to open the door. Because of that, Shiba started approaching him, but Tenri shouted and said he wouldn't give it over his dead body. Tenri forced himself to stand while saying in his mind that this would never happen, and shouted that he wouldn't let anyone interfere here. He remembered what their father told him and Hakuri about being special, and he started explaining to us that his brother, who was 1 year older than him, Hakuri, was different because he wasn't special. He said if other people found out about his brother, his father would be disgraced. In a flashback, he saw his father seemingly thinking alone in their living room, which made him wonder what was happening. There was a scene where Tenri was showered with praise because they heard he single-handedly destroyed a defected faction, and he was said to be the youngest To in history. Kyura called him here and explained that this wasn't just favoritism because he was his son, and this was the indisputable fruit of his efforts, so he was proud of him. The happiness was visible on Tenri's face during these times, and while lying down in the present, he thought he needed to make his father proud of him. He strengthened his resolve and forcefully said he would really do it, and while thinking of his father, a substance suddenly appeared out of thin air, and what looked like a stone fell from it. There was suddenly a flashback about where this stone came from, and here Kyura asked the Hishaka leader what it was, so he explained to him that it was Jinichi Sojo's legacy. He said it no longer existed and was obliterated before reaching Kunishige's realm, but it couldn't be denied that he was a genius. This weapon commanded the temporary stability of Daten-Seiki. In other words, powers that could match the enchanted blades. He told Kyura to choose carefully when to use it, as its effects were temporary, and his body wouldn't be able to contain the flood of spirit energy. While still in the auction hall, Kyura called Tenri and told him to protect them until he died. Tenri took the stone and agreed with his father, while his brother with braids shouted at him not to do it. However, it was too late and Tenri's hand that grabbed the stone began to pulse. Tenri managed to stand again after taking it, and a spirit that looked like a jellyfish began forming behind him. Shiba noticed this was a physical manifestation of spirit energy and asked Tenri what it was while noting in his mind that it was a special spirit energy reaction of an enchanted blade. While Chihiro and Hakuri were heading underground, they suddenly felt something and Chihiro noticed the atmosphere had changed, and while remembering what was said about helping the Sazanami clan several times, he realized that Shiba might be facing something there. Unfortunately, Soya had gotten up from being down and seriously said for them to stop there and that they were dead to him. When Hakuri looked at his brother, he commented in his mind that he had never seen him like this before, and he was serious. His heart began racing because he felt fear while looking at him, but when Chihiro was preparing to fight him, he stopped him and asked if it was true that Cloud Gouger only had a few attacks left, so he should save it for the right time, to which Chihiro tried to object. Hakuri thought that perhaps the reason Chihiro hadn't cut his brother's throat was because he was hesitant to kill him. Hakuri made Chihiro go ahead to the underground, and while preparing to fight, it was explained to us that for the Sazanami, he was just a bud that had finally sprouted. But now that the wall was broken, the genius blood flowing in his innermost being was accelerating his blossoming. He prepared to use Iso again, and told Chihiro that he would handle his brother. In the next scene, we went to a point in time during spring when an 8-year-old Hakuri attended the funeral for his grandfather, Saro Sazanami, the 10th patriarch of the Sazanami clan. He was with Soya, Tenri, and Kyura, and Soya told their father that he might be tired, to which he agreed and said funerals were indeed exhausting. Hakuri asked if they would never see their grandpa again, and Kyura answered no, and that's what it meant to die. Soya tried to tell him that his explanation might be too vulgar for the two children, but he didn't ask about it further. Kyura explained that their grandfather had fulfilled his duty, and from now on, the role their grandfather devoted his life to fulfilling was up to them to uphold. He said he had also inherited his power, the special power created by their first patriarch. Hakuri asked what the first patriarch was, so Kyura explained that he was the very first leader of the Sazanami clan. He explained that he was a brilliant innovator, possessing sorcery that governed space, and roughly 200 years ago, he created a space they called the storehouse. He said this man set into motion the Sazanami dynasty as a family of merchants. He also explained that that power over the storehouse has been passed down from patriarch to patriarch, and their grandfather protected it and passed it on to him. And someday, he said, he would pass that power to one of his children. Hakuri asked if that included the mask he wore, to which Kyura agreed and said this was the symbol of the storehouse guardian, the Sazanami patriarch. Normally, he said, people cannot pass down sorcery, and it was only possible because of the strong bond they had. Hakuri wondered what he meant by bond, and Tenri asked if he meant blood, to which Kyura praised Tenri and called him clever, but said if it were just blood, it would be just a cold, lonely connection, which confused the two children again. Because of that, Kyura asked if they loved him, to which the two answered of course, so he said that was good and as it so happens, he loved them too. He said because they had such a bond, they would never truly be separated, and their grandfather was watching over them from afar. After that, Kyura embraced his children, and we were shown here that they were right above the door leading to the storehouse. In the next scene, we return to the present where Hakuri was telling Chihiro that he would handle Soya. Soya commented that he would really kill Hakuri now, and there was no turning back. He said he had completely gone mad ever since that woman ensnared him. Hikori became irritated and shouted for Chihiro to hurry and leave, making Chihiro think that Hikori was crazy because even though Soya was in bad shape, he still couldn't defeat him. Nevertheless, Hikori begged him to leave and said they needed to move because that was more important. That got his attention, and Chihiro asked what was happening because Hikori wasn't like this earlier, so he also thought that maybe he had experienced a breakthrough. Hikori added that he needed to do this too, and while remembering the times their father talked to them after their grandfather's burial and a woman, he also said he needed to risk his life to settle this once and for all. After that, we moved to Shiba's situation, where Tenri released a physical spirit energy in the shape of a jellyfish. Shiba noticed this was a spirit energy reaction specific to an enchanted blade, and Tenri had held something just now. Tenri's aura seemed to change here, and his hand began to sizzle while holding the stone his father had sent him. In an instant, he vanished from where he was standing, and the floor was destroyed from the force of his movement. He quickly reached behind Shiba, which surprised him, and as an attack tried to hit him with a powerful shockwave, but fortunately Shiba managed to teleport behind him. However, when he tried to counter, Tenri quickly noticed him and shouted not to touch him, while the man with braids began running away from the scene. Tenri's turning attack hit Shiba solidly, causing a powerful shockwave throughout their area, and his brother noticed here that Shiba didn't teleport to dodge it, making him realize that his powers might have a limit, and if they could overwhelm him, they might be able to defeat him. Shiba jumped back and landed on one of the pillars while the damage to his left hand from Tenri's attack was visible, and he commented in his mind that his opponent's speed and strength were becoming insane. The braided one tried to rush him, but he easily repelled him with a punch, but this was used as a distraction by Tenri, and to help, Kyura sent something else into the battle. Countless blobs emerged here, and before long, various kinds of knives and swords came out from them, and Tenri was told to use these. Tenri shouted with intensity and simultaneously sent all the swords toward Shiba using his sorcery. Fortunately, Chihiro arrived there and immediately used Cloud Gouger's UE, and because of this, he managed to freeze the flying swords in place that were heading toward Shiba, which surprised Tenri. He asked Shiba how his timing was, to which he replied it was perfect. He also asked about Cloud Gouger's condition and if he could still use it, so Chihiro explained that after that attack, it could only use full-on May 1.7 times more, which made Shiba comment that it didn't sound good, to which Chihiro pointed out he would use it carefully. After that, Chihiro asked how Tenri had the power of an enchanted blade, so Shiba said he was holding some kind of stone, which made Chihiro realize it was the Daten Seiki. He remembered the Hishaku leader's stated reason for helping the Sazanami clan, his question about why Sojo had the Cloud Gouger, the only usable sacred blade, and what Shiba said about why Sojo wanted to use the Daten Seiki and Char to create a new weapon. Shiba told him that he couldn't help but think of all possibilities, but all he could say was that the enchanted blades were the only way to completely control the Daten Seiki, because otherwise using it would result in death, which Chihiro also knew. Chihiro tried to talk to Tenri and said Hikori had told him about him. He shouted at him asking if he realized the side effects of the weapon he was holding, to which Tenri shouted back that he knew that, and he needed to fulfill his duty. Chihiro clicked his tongue at Tenri's stubbornness, and while this was happening, we returned to a point in time where Hikori was telling them that his family was evil, and he also thought what they were doing was wrong, but he just wanted his beloved father to tell him he was amazing. Chihiro also remembered the times he helped his father with forging, and he fell silent there. Shiba added that the weapon Tenri was holding probably had a limit, and when he was about to say that maybe they should withdraw to regroup, Chihiro objected and said that if it was too late for Tenri, his condition would be bad. He readied his swords and said he would face him head-on and give him an honorable death. After that, we moved to Hikori's situation, and while fighting with Soya, he remembered what he told Chihiro about how he just happened to have someone who put him on the right path, which was why he became like this. Soya continued crying while facing him, but he let out a faint smile as he prepared to launch his attack. Full of emotion, both Soya and Hikori simultaneously released their Iso, which destroyed the point where their shockwaves landed. In the next scene, we move to a flashback from August this year. Inside a warehouse several hundred meters away from the Sazanami residence, merchandise was temporarily stored here before being registered and taken to the storehouse. Hakuri entered here because his family had entrusted him with a job, which he said was the first time in a long while. When he entered a room, he felt cold in the place and scolded a female prisoner labeled as lot number 24, girl with icy skin, because she hadn't eaten her food again. She hadn't drunk or eaten for 2 days since she arrived, so he pointed out that she would die if she continued this. The girl responded that she didn't care and would rather die than be bought and sold by disgusting lowlifes. Hakuri said that she wouldn't decide that and she was valuable merchandise, so he needed to ensure she ate for the Rakuzaichi. He also informed the girl that within 3 weeks, she would be transferred to the storehouse. And until that time came, he was in charge of her. He said he would feed her even if it meant hurting her, and if she continued to refuse and collapsed from hunger, he would give her an IV, because no matter what happened, he wouldn't let her die. The girl with icy skin was quiet for a moment, but soon said that food should be enjoyed with other people. So Hakuri explained that he couldn't let her out of solitary confinement, and she knew that. He added that this girl's strange power constantly made her body radiate cold, and if he put her in a space with other people, she would cause damage. The girl reasoned that she wasn't asking him to let her out of solitary confinement, and she just wanted someone to talk to while eating, and suddenly pointed at him. Because of this, Hakuri became confused and flustered while thinking how weird this girl was. The girl commented that he seemed unfamiliar with women and asked if he was scared of her, which made Hakuri shout for her to be quiet and asked if she would eat if he talked to her, to which the girl responded that she might force herself to swallow something. Hakuri just thought this was for the Rakuzaichi and agreed to the girl's request. After a while, it was shown here that the girl had eaten as evidenced by the reduced amount of food Hakuri brought, and while they were sitting side by side, the girl noticed the bandage wrapped around his pinky finger on his hand, so she asked what happened to it. He explained that it was because his brother Soya pinched it with pliers, which made the girl wonder why his own family was bullying him. He agreed that was the case, but reasoned that he usually didn't use tools. He then mentioned that his big brother always loses things, and almost everything he had used on him was gone, like the wrench, peeler, and rope. He said his brother would tell him these things were lost, then just go back to beating him normally. He told the girl that's what would happen later too, and he would go back to using his fists, to which the girl said that nevertheless, it still wasn't okay, and using pliers was going too far. The girl asked for his hand to look at his finger, and when he gave it to her, he felt coldness in his hand. The girl asked while holding his hand if he had been properly applying ice to it, and slowly cooled his hand. The girl commented that she knew it, and even though she didn't know why, but Hakuri was being rejected by his family, and asked if his coming there to guard her was part of it too. Hakuri wondered how the girl knew that, so she explained that for some reason, she felt comfortable around him. The girl slowly changed how she held his hand, while saying they were both rejects. This made Hakuri blush, and the girl invited him to escape together and forget about this place. However, Hakuri noticed that she was trying to trick him and just wanted to escape, so the girl responded that he had caught her. Despite that, the girl said she really had sympathy for Hakuri, so he shouldn't hesitate to invite her to do that if he thought of it, and she could teach him things he didn't know about the outside. Hakuri said not to get carried away because they weren't equals there, where he was a merchant and she was just merchandise. The only reason he was talking to her was to make her eat and maintain her value as merchandise, and everything he did was for the Rakuzaichi. The girl asked if he really did this even though his family bullied him, which surprised Hakuri, and he explained that it was his own fault for being useless. He said he couldn't do anything, so that was why he wanted to be useful even a little bit, so she should just eat there. After that, the girl started eating the food brought to her, and as time passed, Hakuri and the girl continued talking, and here she always healed the wounds he received from his family's beatings. Hakuri explained here that the girl had started finishing her food and became healthier, so he was happy about that. For the Rakuzaichi, he wanted to be useful to his family, and before Hakuri went to the girl's lot, we were shown here that he was beaten by many Sazanami members. When he returned to the girl, she immediately noticed what happened to his body, where he just said it was nothing, and the beating just lasted longer than usual. The girl asked why, but he just said there was no reason. He gave the girl her food and explained that tomorrow was the intake, and this would be her last meal here. He told her to eat as that was his job. Hakuri sat down again beside the girl after giving the food, and sadly said this was for the Sazanami while remembering the time Kura talked to him and Tenri after their grandfather's burial. Hakuri couldn't help but feel sadness because of what he experienced with his family. The girl asked why he endured it, so he answered that he deserved it. He couldn't use Iso, and he couldn't do anything, so he wasn't special to the Sazanami clan. The girl felt sorry for him, and said that between the two of them, he was actually the one imprisoned in a cage. Living within a small space, she said he had lost sight of his true value. Hakuri questioned what the girl meant by true value, and what value he had, to which the girl answered that he talked to her. Thanks to him, she said she enjoyed her meals. After their conversation, the day of the girl's transfer to the storehouse arrived. Hakuri came to the lot and invited the girl to eat again today, so the girl pointed out that he said yesterday was her last meal there. Hakuri took out the cell key and pointed out they would eat outside, which made the girl comment that she was hoping to win him over, and asked if he had a change of heart, to which Hakuri answered 100%. After that, Hakuri opened the cell, and we suddenly returned to the present where Hakuri was thrown by Soya into the wall, and its force destroyed the wall he hit. Soya commented that he shouldn't get carried away just because he could use a tiny bit of sorcery, and he was still no match for his brother. He said the members of the Sazanami clan were highly skilled but not adored, so if he was going to keep insisting on being like that, perhaps it would be better for him to disappear while he was still lovable. After that, we returned to the time when Hakuri was trying to help the girl with icy skin escape, and he apologized for making her wait before getting out. However, when he went to the girl, he was shocked that she was holding a blade and pointed it at her own neck, while saying she saw this thing and it was probably merchandise. Hakuri answered that it wasn't merchandise, but quickly changed his question to why. The girl explained that this was the reason why she wanted to leave her cell, and she was sorry for using him, but he refused to let her die from hunger. She said from the start she wanted to die, and there was no point in living with this skin. So Hakuri pointed out that her skin soothed his injuries. The girl said that the person she loved most also said such words at first, but after some time sold her. She said the same thing always happened, and she knew that. The girl began pressing the knife to her neck, causing it to bleed, while saying that because of her skin people always left her, and her only worth was as a curiosity or tool. Hakuri remembered what she said before about being able to teach him about things he didn't know about the outside. But then this girl was suddenly contradicting what she said earlier. Because of this, Hakuri shouted to wait and reminded her that they talked together. Hakuri thought that because of being sold by the man who was with the girl before and the Rakuzaichi, this girl's heart was destroyed. Hakuri started breathing heavily because of the events, and he remembered the painful things he said before to the girl that she was valuable merchandise, so he couldn't let her die, and if he put her in a space with other people she would cause damage. Hakuri's tears flowed because of the heaviness of his feelings, and he blamed himself saying he killed that girl. When he remembered what she said about being sorry for using him, he thought if that meant everything she told him during the times they talked was all lies. We returned to the present after that, and here Soya buried Hakuri in the ground using his Iso, and after that Soya walked away from him. While Hakuri was thinking that nevertheless, despite everything that girl did to him, there was still something, Soya heard something come out behind him and fall to the ground, and when he turned he saw a pair of pliers. Soya was puzzled by this, and when he looked at him he saw that the shadow was still continuing to emerge from his left eye. In the next scene, we went to a flashback where Hakuri, Chihiro, and Shiba were talking. Here, Shiba was explaining to Hakuri that there were stages to becoming a sorcerer. First, he said you train to summon spirit energy and circulate it in your body. Next, you use that spirit energy to manifest sorcery. The power used for sorcery is innate, he said, and it dwells in an individual's physical body. He said the type of sorcery you can use is predetermined. Once you learn to manifest it, your intuitive understanding of it deepens gradually, where you begin to unravel its mysteries. In a lineage like the Sazanami clan, he said their sorcery was inherited, so Hakuri had good 10-to-1 odds that his power would be Iso, and for Shiba, he thought spirit energy was already circulating in his body. Next, he said if he could find how to unleash that spirit energy, no matter how subtle its force, Hakuri could hold onto that feeling and learn to wield it. That would be the time he truly grasped the extent of the power residing within him. After that, we returned to the present where while Hakuri was lying down, he focused on his sorcery to grasp it. When Soya looked at him, he saw several things coming out from a blob that looks like the ones Kyura can manipulate, and he noticed these were his missing tools that he used to beat Hakuri. Soya stared at Hakuri, while Hakuri was telling himself that Iso wasn't his only power, and there was something else hidden within him. While manifesting his other power, he saw a space where there was a small floating island with various objects scattered on it. In Hakuri's mind, he said he was beginning to understand this, while Soya couldn't believe what he was seeing. We suddenly moved to a point in time where Kyura was telling him that he would inherit the power of the storehouse, and once he passed it to him, he wouldn't be able to use Iso anymore. Aside from basic movement and barrier sorcery, he said fundamentally a person could only wield one type of power. He said that's how it was unless you were a genius like the first patriarch of their lineage. Soya asked here if the first patriarch was different, so Kyura began explaining that the first patriarch was born with the ability to control both the storehouse and Iso. He said that he was a maverick, unlike anything ever seen in the world of sorcerers. He explained that not only could he wield two types of power, the sorcery to create the storehouse in subspace was itself heretical, so as a result, the storehouse isn't inherited by blood. Instead, it's passed down through a ceremony. It was a sacred power, he said, and it came with a price, so Soya asked if Tenri couldn't inherit it instead, to which Kyura explained that while Tenri had rare talents, they weren't like his. He said that Child would become the strongest warrior, while Soya would become the patriarch. While looking at Hakuri, he also remembered what his father said about understanding that it was time to heed his station and forget about Hakuri. He told him not to fixate on that failure, to which Soya reasoned that because he was a failure, that made him so endearing. In the present, Hakuri struggled to stand up, and after standing he remembered what Shiba told him that once he understood his power, and learned to intentionally infuse it with spirit energy and command it freely, he would become a sorcerer. At this moment, it was revealed that Hakuri managed to manifest the same mask that Kyura uses to control the storehouse. Soya remembered Kyura's explanation that this mask was the mark of the steward of the storehouse, as well as the mark of the patriarch of the Sazanami lineage. He wondered why Hakuri had the mask, and if this meant the storehouse was within him too, but if so, that would explain how he manifested the tools he saw. Just earlier he had activated Iso even though it was weak, so he thought this meant he had two types of power. He remembered what Kyura said about how that heretical power had never been inherited by blood. However, he believed that one day, it might re-emerge in their bloodline. That genius, which only the first patriarch could command. Soya refused to accept what he was seeing, and violently punched Hakuri in the body while shouting that this was impossible. He began questioning Hakuri why it was him, and said this couldn't be possible because he couldn't do anything. He said he couldn't even stand properly, so he should stop this and just die. While saying this, he started coughing up blood, so Hakuri commented that he too was barely enduring the pain, and it turned out that Chihiro's attack had caused significant damage to his back. Soya's eyes widened when he felt a force coming from Hakuri, and while Hakuri was doing this, he remembered what the girl with cold skin said about him being imprisoned in a cage. He explained here that those words made him realize that the time he spent with her was a balm to his tortured existence. Even if everything she said was a lie, if only his response had been better, and if he had just shown that there was hope outside her cage, maybe that girl wouldn't have chosen death. Soya tightened his grip on Hakuri's chest, causing him to cough up blood, but Hakuri just continued apologizing to the girl in his mind, while Soya shouted at him to die while calling him worthless. He slammed him against the wall, and because of that he seemed to lose consciousness. However, when he thought that at this time he would prove something, and how he saw Chihiro fight against Sojo, he managed to plant his feet on the ground and didn't lose consciousness. Because of this, Soya shouted asking why he wouldn't fall and why he wouldn't die. Hikori remembered what Shiba told him about maybe getting that power because he developed it naturally for self-defense, and he answered Soya that it was because he always loved him. After that, the narrator explained to us here that the reason Hikori couldn't use Iso for a long time was because he was unconsciously using almost all of his spirit energy to maintain and manage the storehouse, and now that he was aware of this, he could focus and unleash his spirit energy. Hikori used Iso with concentrated spirit energy on Soya, and with its strength he managed to send him flying upward. While this was happening, we moved to Chihiro's situation while fighting Tenri, who now had the Daten-Seki in his hand. While still in the air, Tenri used Iso to balance his body, while trying to attack Chihiro. Chihiro was forced to retreat because of Tenri's speed, and he acknowledged this. He noticed that when utilizing shock waves for high-speed movement and offense to this extent, a Yui or weak Mei wouldn't be enough to parry it. He said only one charge of his all-out Mei remained, so he needed to end this. He put Cloud Gouger in his mouth again and used Mei, but Tenri didn't back down and thought to just charge ahead. The two were so fast they seemed to vanish from Shiba and the braided man's sight, causing him to ask what was happening. When Tenri saw a chance, he tried to use Iso on Chihiro, but unexpectedly, Chihiro was faster than him and managed to quickly slash his two arms and get behind him to deliver a finishing blow. When Chihiro's short sword was about to touch Tenri's neck, his body started to bulge, and while calling out to his father, his body completely exploded due to the strain from the small stone of Daten-Seki. The braided one became sad because Tenri's time had run out, while the dying Tenri managed to apologize to their father because he couldn't do his job. Sympathy was visible on Chihiro's face when he saw this scene, and before long, Hikori arrived down there. It turns out Hikori had managed to defeat his brother upstairs, and while gasping for breath, he told Chihiro to go to the door and they would finish this together. While all of this was happening, the Rakuzaichi continued in the auction hall. In the next scene, they had opened the door leading to the underground cemetery, called Najino-Joan, and while going down, Shiba commented that Hikori appeared to be a colossal genius. He said he had never seen two different abilities in one person, to which Hikori commented that he was surprised by it too. Shiba added that most people couldn't use sorcery that quickly at first. Hikori asked if, despite this, was it right that Chihiro believed this would happen so he left him behind, to which Chihiro answered that was part of it, but if he were to put a damper on his determination, they wouldn't be able to become equal allies. On the other side, the man with braids approached his companion with bangs and tried to wake him up. Upon waking, he immediately asked where the intruders were, so he answered that they were heading to the emergency door. The CCTV in their room rang, and the braided one told the one with bangs that they needed to stop them before they reached the storehouse, and they needed to give it their all. While this was happening, Kyura was watching them briefly through the security cameras while the auction continued. He acknowledged Tenri's sacrifice that gave their family spoils of war. On Chihiro's side, the remaining part of Cloud Gouger suddenly cracked, so Chihiro said its power was really depleted now, to which Shiba said it would be okay because now they just needed to enter the storehouse and take back the Enten. While they were talking, we were shown Kyura grinning as if he had a surprise prepared for them. Shiba told Chihiro to wait a moment and asked Hikori if now that he had the power that controls the storehouse, could he infiltrate it like how Kyura moves items in and out. Hikori answered that their abilities probably worked the same way, but the spaces they could access were different, and they oversaw different spaces, which made Shiba comment that if that was the case, then the door in front of them was their only hope. Chihiro destroyed the locks of the door, and when they opened it, shock was visible on their faces at what they saw inside. It turns out they looked like this because they saw that the emergency door leading to the storehouse was destroyed, which made them wonder what had happened. before long, the remaining members of the toe caught up, and Braids was dismayed that this was what they were protecting. This got Chihiro's attention, and he was surprised that even the toe didn't know about this. Kyura then suddenly explained that lifelines were the first thing you should put down. Their goal now was to exterminate the owner of the Inten, Chihiro Rokuhira, along with his guardians. He knew Shiba had the ability to appear and disappear at will, therefore, they needed to draw him out to fight, so they presented the emergency door. Now he said they needed to eliminate the risk. Because of this, the man with braids wondered why Kyura hadn't told them about this. Chihiro asked if that meant Tenri sacrificed his life to protect a door that was already broken, to which Kyura said no, and his death was a means to see what Chihiro and his companions would offer. Dismay was visible on the braided one's face as he remembered what he said about the instructions being clear not to overthink. He forced himself to charge again while thinking that if they couldn't turn back now, he wouldn't let Tenri's death be in vain, and he and his companion with bangs prepared to fight there. Shiba commented that if that was the case, they never had a chance of winning from the start, while Chihiro clicked his tongue in irritation. Kyura told them that he had already said that the Sazanami clan were the hunters here, and the braided and banged ones charged at Chihiro again, where Shiba shouted for them to fall back. While this was happening, we were shown a woman imprisoned inside the storehouse, as well as Chihiro's Enten, and Chihiro wondered here what they would achieve by retreating. While Hakuri was looking at the destroyed door, he remembered his father asking them if they loved him, and he called out to Shiba. We suddenly moved to the auction hall where the Rakuzaichi continued. What Kyura was showing here now was a piece of flesh from the Kaya clan, and while he was explaining that the many legends surrounding this clan showed their unique physical characteristics, Kyura noticed Hakuri coming down the stairs from one of the entrances there. The two exchanged glances, and Kyura commented that if Hakuri had reached here, it meant he had figured it out. He said the storehouse they controlled was in separate spaces, but it worked the same way. Although the rooms were different, he still knew how to open the doors, so he asked was he right that he would try to force open his storehouse. He also remembered what he told Tenri and Hakuri that it was impossible for people to pass down sorcery, and their family could only do it because of the strong bond they had. Hakuri reached into his pocket, while Kyura added that he was at fault for failing to discern his talents, but as of now, Hakuri was the enemy, and they weren't connected at all anymore. Hakuri closed his eyes and said he wanted to abandon Kyura too, but while putting the pliers into his space, remembering how Kyura had him beaten up and the time they talked above the emergency door, he said that in the end, he still wanted his father to praise him. Hakuri teleported his pliers, which caught Kyura's attention, and it turns out this was because Hakuri managed to send that object to the storehouse where the Inten and other merchandise for the Rakuzaichi were. After that, Hakuri sat down on the stairs from exhaustion, and Chihiro arrived there too. Hakuri told him that he couldn't do anything with the items inside there, but somehow he managed to send something there from their side. This got Chihiro's attention, and when he called him, we moved to inside Kyura's storehouse, where he entered and saw the pliers Hakuri had sent. While looking at this, before long, a blob began forming above him, and it turns out this was Chihiro, and Hakuri had managed to send him to this place. While falling, Chihiro immediately saw the Enten, while Kyura wondered why he would infiltrate the space when his enchanted blade was currently useless. The floor surrounding the Enten began to rise, which surprised Hakuri. Kyura shouted here that this was his realm, and he quickly raised several parts of the floor toward the free-falling Chihiro. Hakuri couldn't believe that Kyura could reconfigure this space, and said this was bad. He shouted Chihiro's name in concern, while Chihiro was thinking about what to do. He talked to Cloud Gouger, and said he knew its power was depleted, but as Rokuhira property, it should pull it together. He used Mei again even though Cloud Gouger was completely broken, and the prisoners turned to look at him while this was happening. Despite Cloud Gouger's damage, it still managed to release an extraordinary thunderstrike that destroyed Kyura's attack. Amazement was visible on the face of Mr. Inazuma's sister, while Hakuri continued watching from outside. After that, Chihiro landed in front of Kyura, and while the smoke was clearing, he said in his mind that he and Hakuri weren't equals. He said he defeated Soya, and even though that was his family, he was determined to do what was necessary in order to destroy evil, while his personal feelings had caused him to falter twice, so he was the only naive one here. Cloud Gouger began to disintegrate, and he thanked it while this was happening. It turns out he was now holding a new katana, and he added that if he couldn't defeat him here, it meant he had no right to use an enchanted blade. Kyura waited for him to emerge from the smoke, and he suddenly used the Inten on him. While this was happening, Hakuri called him from outside and asked him to kill his father. At last, Chihiro had recovered his enchanted blade, and he immediately unsheathed it and prepared to fight Kyura, while telling Hakuri he would do it. One of Chihiro's spirit energy goldfish began swimming around him, while Kyura and Hakuri waited to see what would happen. Chihiro used Nishiki here, and we suddenly returned to several dozens of seconds earlier, where Hakuri was explaining to Chihiro that his father was inside the storehouse now, which made Chihiro ask who was on the stage. Kyura said it was just a video image, and he had swapped with it and was projecting his father's mind there. Chihiro thought about the words video image and remembered what Shiba said about it being Kyura's sorcery, a variation of his preview thing. Hakuri added that the real Kyura was waiting inside the storehouse. He said the registration was complete and now he could bring Chihiro to the storehouse, and just as Hakuri was about to say what they had left to do, he noticed something. It was explained to us that registration was a groundwork sorcery, where it couldn't override counteracting spirit energy. A sorcerer or someone supported by a sorcerer could guard against it and counter it. It was also said here that Chihiro's spirit energy was imbued inside the Inten, so it could resist registration, and Kyura couldn't simply transport it wherever he wanted. Chihiro asked if something had happened, so Hakuri said that just now, he gained the ability to transport the Inten, which puzzled Chihiro. He explained that the Inten was imbued with Chihiro's spirit energy and was tied to him, albeit indirectly, so it was possible it was registered along with him. He thought they could retrieve the Inten from his father's storehouse, and when he was about to say there was more, Chihiro asked what would happen to Kyura's storehouse if they killed him. So Hakuri said based on his intuition it wouldn't immediately collapse, and he thought Chihiro's theory was right when he said Kyura was lying about the storehouse and its exit disappearing if he died. Chihiro asked him if with his current powers, couldn't he take over managing the storehouse if its previous manager died. Chihiro added that he didn't need to get the Inten, and just to bring him inside his storehouse. After that, we returned to the present, where after Chihiro used Nishiki, he thought that he needed to kill the real Kyura. Next, he also used Kuro Shred, causing small black goldfish to emerge around them, and Kyura commented that they had a deal where he would trade Hakuri and he would get the Inten, so he would take it back. Chihiro said Kyura seemed rather collected, and asked if he was right that he hadn't anticipated this, to which Kyura answered that he could accept any result as long as he gave his very best, and besides, he still had his own life, which he would stake to protect the Rakuzaichi. Chihiro then pointed out that his best should have been trusting Hakuri, so Kyura answered that he wasn't interested in arguing about this, and for the Inten, and for the Rakuzaichi, they would now fight to the death. Chihiro silently stood in front of Kyura, and in the blink of an eye he suddenly vanished, and quickly got close to Kyura where he was ready to deliver a slash, but as a counter Kyura used the floor and put swords at its ends, and because of this he stopped Chihiro's charge and made him jump away. Kyura commented that was close, while Chihiro looked at Kyura's attack. He noticed he had hidden katanas, and was amazed because Kyura had the hand-eye coordination to calmly handle his Nishiki. In Kyura's mind, he said he had thoroughly demonstrated his dedication to the Rakuzaichi, and added that threatening to use his precious merchandise as hostages wouldn't work anymore. He also said to enlarge their room, and their battlefield with Kyura began to expand because he moved all the merchandise away from their surroundings. He pointed out to Chihiro that this space was his along with all the goods here, including the landscape, and it followed his wishes, so this world existed for him. He remembered what he said about not being arrogant enough to say he could win against someone using an enchanted blade, but if it's a battle within his storehouse, then he can kill him. He quickly sent countless floor tentacle attacks at Chihiro, and the watching Hakuri was surprised at the scale of his father's power. Fortunately, Chihiro also showed his speed here, and like an agile fish he dodged all of Kyura's attacks coming at him. Kyura commented in his mind that Chihiro was indeed fast, but he could imbue more than just katanas. It turns out he had placed grenades in his floor attacks, which caught Chihiro's attention. They all exploded simultaneously, but fortunately Chihiro could still dodge them. Hakuri worried while watching and thought this was bad because Chihiro couldn't counter all of this using speed alone. Chihiro continued moving quickly here to avoid being hit by the explosions, but unexpectedly, more grenades began appearing from thin air, causing Hakuri to shout in concern, while Kyura grinned at what he had done. However, this wasn't enough to stop Chihiro, and using his extraordinary skills with the katana, he easily sliced all the grenades appearing beside him as if dancing with them. Unfortunately, they continued to ignite, which caught Hakuri's attention. Kyura commented in his mind about what Chihiro's slicing would accomplish there, while Chihiro shouted Hakuri's name. Hakuri focused and said in his mind that as long as anything is indirectly tied to Chihiro, then he could transport them. Using his sorcery, he transported the about-to-explode bombs around the center of the bidders in the auction hall. Because of this, the bodies of the unfortunate bidders who were touched by the bombs exploded, causing a huge commotion in the place. The people at the event were disturbed, and they thought shockwaves had caused it. Kyura clicked his tongue in irritation at Hakuri's use of others' spirit energy to transport objects. After that, we returned to the storehouse, and here Kyura ridiculed what they did and asked if they really called that a counterattack, when he wasn't even injured by it. He said he still had command of copious material, while Chihiro was gradually fizzing out. Kyura shouted here that he would protect the Rakuzaichi and Chihiro couldn't do anything here. However, while preparing to attack, he felt something that made him wonder what that peculiar feeling was. When he sensed it, it turns out the people they had captured to auction at the Rakuzaichi had vanished from inside the cages, and he was shocked that most of his merchandise was gone. It turns out the reason Chihiro was breathing heavily here was because Hakuri had used his spirit energy to do this. Kyura carefully examined what had happened moments ago, and here he noticed that Chihiro's small black goldfish had approached the prisoners, entered their bodies, and soon after they disappeared. He couldn't believe that Chihiro had prioritized that thing, and realized that those fish were concentrations of spirit energy, and his initial move wasn't simply a smokescreen, but a way to imbue the merchandise with his energy to transport them. In the auction hall, the bidders were panicking, and they started running out of the place because they were afraid they would die there, and some shouted that this was the end of the Rakuzaichi. Kyura remembered what Chihiro told him about how his best should have been trusting Hakuri, and he started becoming filled with annoyance. He began wrapping his remaining merchandise inside the storehouse with the floor, including Mr. Inazuma's sister, which caught Chihiro's attention. While he was doing this, we returned to the auction hall and he started banging his gavel loudly to get the bidders' attention and shouted here for them to return as they were just getting started. He said the auction would continue as planned, and said here that now they would auction the Shinuchi enchanted blade, and he showed its sealed box to the bidders. We returned to the storehouse, and here Kyura said in a pissed-off manner that he would destroy them, while Chihiro told Hakuri they're gonna pick up the speed, to which Hakuri agreed with him. In the next scene, Hakuri had released the prisoners or merchandise of the Sazanami clan, and they were seen by some people inside a car from a distance. Inside the car were Char, Mr. Inazuma, and Hinao, who told the two children that the people they were seeing might be the ones up for auction, so they should wait there while she checks. Char then asked if Mr. Inazuma's sister was there, but he couldn't answer her and seemed nervous. On the other hand, there were still prisoners or merchandise inside the storehouse, So Chihiro's goldfish continued searching for them. He then asked how he could save the other prisoners now that the defenses were strengthened. Kyura then remarked how tragic it was that Chihiro was pouring all his effort into freeing his precious merchandise. Chihiro replied, telling him not to worry because from that point on, they would fight to the death, and Kyura stated that Chihiro's ally, his child Hakuri, was at his limit. In the next scene, it was shown that Hakuri's head was hurting from the toll of transportation, and he was even getting nosebleeds because of it. Meanwhile, his father was matching Chihiro's speed and could still attack powerfully. According to Kyura, connecting one's mind to subspace is incredibly difficult, and when overdone, it would fry a person's mind. Then, he told his child Hakuri that he wouldn't surpass him, adding that many of their ancestors had given their lives for Rakuzaichi, and on that day, Rakuzaichi was at its zenith because of the auction of 2 enchanted blades. Inside the auction event, people were shocked because the enchanted blades auction had been moved up in the proceedings, and Kyura thought that the blast must have gotten everyone on edge, so they should go wild. That's exactly what happened as people became chaotic. So the female member of the Shinichi bidding team asked if they would continue the auction despite the chaos, saying how insane the people were. The male member replied that he understood why because the auction of an enchanted blade was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. He added that even so, the auction could be cut short at any moment because this whole time, the merchandise was just projected, and just a little while ago, even the auctioneer had been replaced with a projection. The woman was surprised by this, so she asked where the real thing was, and the man replied that he didn't know, but Hiyuki hadn't reported yet regarding Chihiro's capture. He also said that if Kyura was creating an image using sorcery while he was somewhere else, possibly fighting, then he must be pushing himself to the limit, and on top of that, Kyura wasn't letting anyone intrude on the stage. Back in the storehouse, Kyura told Chihiro it was time he put a stop to his nonsense. Chihiro then said that Kyura does get emotional, but wondered why he wouldn't even grieve for his own son's deaths. Kyura replied that Rakuzaichi wasn't over yet, so there was no point in grieving because his children had done their duty, and his is to continue. Because of this, Chihiro asked if Kyura would really call himself a father, and Kyura said he didn't know Chihiro's criteria for being a father, but he was wrong to measure him by them, as he was the leader of the Sazanami clan. At that moment, Chihiro suddenly became alert because the floor he was standing on disappeared, and Kyura used this to attack Chihiro, saying his speed was meaningless if he had nowhere to stand on. A barrage of spikes hit Chihiro, but to Kyura's surprise, Chihiro dodged because only his clothes were hit by the spikes. While Chihiro was dodging Kyura's attacks, he thought that he was getting tired from the consecutive battles and the Kuro shred, and he didn't want to spend too much time. But Kyura wasn't bluffing that this was his space, so he continued attacking Chihiro effortlessly. Kyura thought that Chihiro couldn't get close to him, but he couldn't afford to fool around either. In the next scene, we were shown Hakuri sitting on the stairs, and according to his father, he was useless at this point, or in other words, Chihiro couldn't use his trump card anymore, and he would finish him with a blast. On the other hand, Chihiro used Kuro Shred, and Kyura noticed that Chihiro had gathered his extra goldfish, so in response, he created a defensive wall to shield himself from Chihiro's slashing attacks. However, the shield he made just shattered from Chihiro's attack, and he couldn't believe that his opponent used multiple slash attacks, but they won't reach him. Yet Chihiro threw the Inten as a surprise attack, and it looked like it would hit Kyura as it was just a span away from him. However, Kyura managed to grab a sword and deflected Chihiro's thrown katana. Thinking that Chihiro couldn't get close, so he threw the Inten as an all-or-nothing gamble, but that was too bad. Then, he spawned numerous bombs where Chihiro was, resulting in a massive explosion. At that moment, Kyura thought about what Chihiro said, that his best should have been believing in Hakuri, but to his surprise, Chihiro suddenly appeared behind him. Because of this, he said that Hakuri had surpassed his imagination many times that day, like transporting Chihiro behind him. So at that moment, he was onto Hakuri, and he thought he had won. He slashed Chihiro's face, but something seemed strange about it, so he asked himself if it was just a preview, wondering where the real Chihiro was, who would attack him from above, and at that moment, Chihiro remembered what Hakuri told him about killing Kyura, his father. Chihiro sliced Kyura's body, causing a huge splash of blood. Kyura then had a flashback to when Hakuri told him that he had decided he wanted to become a leader surpassing his father. He replied then that if that's what Hakuri wanted, he would expect great things from him. Back to the present, Kyura seemed to be surrounding himself with his powers. He buried himself in the floor, which surprised Chihiro as to why he did that. Kyura was bleeding non-stop, so he thought that he had received a fatal wound, and it wouldn't be long before he died that day, but Rakuzaichi would still continue, and it seemed he had released the Shinichi. The male member of the Shinichi bidding team explained that the enchanted blades were limited by their eternal contracts, and if the point of the box was for double protection in case the master died, he wondered if other enchanted blades had the same thing, talking about the rope tied around the box. He was saying something about the reason why the enchanted blades weren't like that, but he didn't finish it, and he said it was just his guess, but maybe because the Shinichi was so powerful, the eternal contract wasn't enough to limit it. On the other hand, Kyura seemed to be telling someone to proceed, and of course, he was referring to Rakuzaichi. In the next scene, Kyura was shown sitting next to the Shinichi box, saying that no matter what, the enchanted blade was his merchandise, and his image announced that the auction would proceed. Because of this, someone asked if it was just an illusion, and if that was the true power of the Shinichi. The Lady Shinichi bidding team member had the same reaction, saying it was power beyond the control of an eternal contract, and it seems like her senpai's theory was correct, and he said something about the box, but the scene returned to Chihiro, who was still staring at where Kyura had buried himself. He thought that Kyura couldn't hold out for more than a few seconds, but he can't let up on him. He used his Kuro skill to open the ground that Kyura was using as shelter, and he was gradually damaging Kyura. Someone asked why the Hishaku put the Shinichi up for auction in the first place, and it was Chihiro in a flashback, to which Mr. Shiba replied that it was probably to get the Kamiyanabi to bid for it. He added that the Hishaku went through the trouble of stealing the enchanted blades, so of course they'd want to use them, and in that case, they first have to kill the owners. So the Kamiyanabi were hiding the sword masters under strict protection somewhere in Japan. Besides that, the Hishaku wanted to break through the current deadlock, and even if the Kamiyanabi got the Shinichi, they wouldn't be able to keep it under containment, and there would inevitably be internal conflict. They might move the master swordsman, and at any rate, he thought that the Hishaku was looking for a distraction to kill the sword masters. Chihiro remembered his father saying that the Shinichi is unique, so that's why it's under more strict protection than the others. To contain its unique ability to overpower its eternal contract, Shinichi was protected inside a box, with ropes, for 18 years after the war, and even Chihiro hadn't seen what was inside. Mr. Shiba said that the box's seal was extremely robust, and the old farts of Kamiyanabi made it. To break the seal and open the box, it needed bio-authentication from the 3 old farts he mentioned. He added that it might be possible to independently analyze the sealing ceremony and find another approach to break the seal, but with a seal of that level, it would take even the most skilled sorcerer at least 10 years. If they couldn't open it, they couldn't handle the Shinichi, so Hishaku's possession of it wouldn't yield any good results. They put it up for auction to shift the status quo, and that was his theory. Back to the present where Chihiro had opened where Kyura had buried himself, and according to Chihiro, as long as the Shinichi box's seal was intact, but before he could finish, it was shown that the Shinichi box's seal had been broken, and the enchanted blade was gone. Chihiro seemed unable to believe what he was seeing, and he remembered what Mr. Shiba said about possibly breaking the seal independently, but it would take at least 10 years. In the next scene, we were shown the Hishaku leader, who said it had been an intense 3 years, and after that day, he funneled everything into opening the Shinichi box. He was talking with other Hishaku members, and someone asked him if he didn't want to open the Shinichi first to enjoy its fruits, and another asked if Kyura would use it. The leader replied that Kyura, who lived for Rakuzaichi, would use it, and when driven to a tight corner, Kyura will grasp at straws. He also explained that the reason he's letting Kyura turn the key because even if Kyura is able to wield the tip of the Shinichi, he figured the risk is greater, which made his conversation partner wonder what risk he was referring to. The leader said that as long as the Shinichi's master was alive somewhere, they couldn't be sure they had primary command over it. So in other words, Kyura is a guinea pig, aka a test subject. In the next scene, we were shown the master swordsman, in a place with pillars that had talismans attached. Inside the storehouse, Kyura was standing behind Chihiro at a distance, and Chihiro still seemed stunned by what he saw. The Hishaku leader asked what would happen now that Kyura had the Shinuchi. The scene jumped to Hakuri, who looked extremely tired and blood continued to drip from his nose. Then, Kyura was also shown in the same situation, now with black eyes, and Chihiro noticed something about him. It was the most powerful enchanted blade, the Shinuchi. A drop of liquid fell from the Shinuchi's guard, and the scene shifted back to the master swordsman, and he seemed to be doing something to his hand. Then, the master swordsman mentioned the word Magitsumi, and when the liquid hit the floor, a black circle appeared at Kyura's feet. From it, numerous plants and flowers grew, and a butterfly flew toward Kyura's hand. Hakuri seemed to be watching this, so he asked what it was. In the next scene, the butterfly that approached Kyura had become gigantic, and Kyura said he couldn't draw the sword, but how wonderful it was to command the very tip of its power. Chihiro seemed stunned by what was happening in front of him, so he questioned if the person before him was still Kyura, or if it was someone else. Kyura charged at Chihiro and tried to attack him even though the Shinuchi was still in its sheath. Chihiro heard the sound of a blade, making him realize that the Shinuchi could cut even while sheathed. On the other hand, Hakuri thought that he and Chihiro were extremely worn down, and at that moment, Hiyuki arrived and asked him about the situation. Everyone in the audience was shocked because Kyura was now using the Shinuchi, and at that moment, Kyura kicked Chihiro. Then he pointed the Shinuchi at Chihiro as if telling him to make his move, and because of his kick, Chihiro was thrown far away, seemingly shocked by Kyura's strength. On the other hand, according to Kyura, something was invading his mind, and in the next panel, the master swordsman was shown, suggesting that he was the one invading Kyura's mind. Then, Kyura said that the Shinuchi or the master swordsman was trying to hijack him, and at that moment, cracks appeared inside the storehouse, which Chihiro noticed. Some parts of the storehouse floor were starting to float, and Kyura thought he was on the brink of death, too weak to stand, so he wondered if that's the price he has to pay. In reality, his projection was starting to glitch, but he thought he wouldn't give in to whoever or whatever was hijacking his mind. Then, his projection told the audience to watch closely, because he would demonstrate the power of the Shinuchi, and with that power, he would kill Chihiro Rokuhira and auction off the Enten. The male member of the Shinuchi bidding team noticed that Chihiro was Kyura's opponent, who used the spider skill, causing a spider web to appear at Chihiro's feet, so he got shocked because he can't move. Then, Kyura followed it with the dragonfly skill, and the dark force and plants that appeared at Kyura's feet gradually approached Chihiro, making him tell himself not to touch it. At that moment, Hakuri used his powers, and we can see a blob appearing near Chihiro, and smoke seemed to be coming from it that was followed by a massive explosion. However, both Kyura and Hakuri seemed unfazed, and Hiyuki suddenly appeared, asking Chihiro what gives, saying he looks practically dead. Chihiro asked where Hiyuki came from, wondering if she had made contact with Hakuri, and according to Hiyuki, she would destroy everything, including the enchanted blades, Chihiro, and Rakuzaichi. Chihiro said there were still many prisoners there, and he was about to say something about rescuing them, but Hiyuki cut him off, telling him she already knew that, and he should just focus on killing Kyura first. She added that Hakuri had told her everything, and had threatened her that he wouldn't let her out until she died if he hurt Chihiro. Then she asked Chihiro what happened to Hakuri the past week. The Shinuchi bidding team members noticed that Hiyuki had joined the fight, and the man asked what was happening, so he asked Tafuku to explain. The woman didn't seem to expect Tafuku to be there, and he replied what was there to explain, because Hiyuki was just on a mission, tasked with protecting Chihiro. The man accepted his explanation, saying they would handle the rap for that. Back inside the storehouse, Hiyuki was asking how Kyura was still alive with those wounds. She also asked if this was the power of Shinuchi, and Chihiro replied that he thought so, remembering that whenever Shinuchi was mentioned, his father would clam up. In another part of the storehouse, it was shown that the place was being slowly destroyed, so Chihiro thought it might be due to the Shinuchi's influence, and the place was becoming unstable, so he told Hiyuki they needed to hurry. Hiyuki said not to order her around, because Chihiro would be dead without her, but Chihiro reasoned that he could have blocked Kyura's attack. However, according to Hiyuki, To stave off that freaky move, Chihiro would need a blast as powerful as the flame bone. At that moment, Chihiro used Aka and the flame bone, causing his left arm, holding the inten, to burst into flames. Hiyuki was surprised that Chihiro had absorbed the flame bone, and Chihiro explained that Aka absorbs the power of an attack, allowing him to use that power temporarily. He said it happened during their last fight, but according to Hiyuki, it was still her power. Chihiro again said they needed to hurry, so Hiyuki again replied not to order her around. And they both looked deeply at Kyura, who was looking back at them deeply, seemingly full of anger. Then, Chihiro used Kuro to attack Kyura, but unlike the normal Kuro, it was accompanied by fire. Kyura was surprised by the long-range slash attack infused with flames, and he tried to block it using Shinuchi, but simultaneously, Hiyuki had gotten behind him and was about to punch him. However, Kyura turned around to block it, and Tofuku thought that if the flame bone and inten worked together, they might defeat the Shinuchi. Kyura caught the flame bone with Shinuchi, and he threw Hiyuki very far away before attacking Chihiro, who realized that Kyura's physical capabilities had been enhanced by whoever had possessed him. On the other hand, Kyura dragged the Shinuchi across the floor, and from there, plants and flowers grew again. Then, Kyura unsheathed the Shinuchi a little and used the centipede skill against the two. The centipede skill released extremely powerful shockwaves that threw back Chihiro, Hiyuki, and other scattered debris. Chihiro and Hiyuki worried because of this, and someone said it was tremendous, and it was just a fraction of Shinuchi's power. They added that Shinuchi was doing this against an enchanted blade and the flame bone, and Tofuku hoped that Chihiro and Hiyuki would win. In reality, Kyura's projection was asking the audience who would possess the Shinuchi, saying the auction would continue. The bidding would start at 1 billion, and many people immediately bid on it. For different people, the enchanted blade had different values, because for Hiyuki, it belonged to the Kamyanabi, and for Kyura, it was his merchandise, while for Chihiro, it's his father's legacy. In the next scene, we went back to the past, where Tofuku asked Hiyuki if she was serious about killing Chihiro after everything was over. Obviously, Hiyuki replied, because Chihiro wouldn't give up the enchanted blades unless she killed him, asking what was wrong with that and if Tofuku was siding with Chihiro. Tofuku responded that he wasn't, and he only asked because Chihiro would never turn his blade against her, yet she wouldn't do the same. Hiyuki said that she didn't kill Chihiro back then because he was so pitiful, and she wasn't as taken with Chihiro as Tofuku was. At that time, she's ignoring orders to save something that should have been thrown out, and while saying this, she thought about the child earlier who was screaming to bring back his sister. She then continued saying that next time, she will kill Chihiro, even if he's pathetic, adding that she would take the enchanted blade, and that's where she stands. Back to the present, and Tofuku seemed nervous about the fight, cheering for Hiyuki and Chihiro to win. The female member of the Shinuchi bidding team said that the Shinuchi sure looks nasty, and her companion remarked that Kyura was losing his grip, which was nothing compared to what the Shinuchi could really do, making it hard to tell what Kyura was capable of in his state. In a flashback, Tofuku was shown trying to stop Hiyuki, saying that all lives are important, while the man said they were talking about Hiyuki, asking if they remembered the crazy things she said. He added that the woman and Tofuku, whom he called youngsters, hadn't seen war yet, so it was easy for them to become complacent. He was saying something about Shinuchi's true power, and it showed Kyura's projection and real body glitching. But before the man could finish what he was saying, Kyura's projection and the screen showing the fight disappeared, making everyone wonder where they went. Tofuku and the female bidding team member had the same reaction, and the man said not to tell him it had something to do with the Shinuchi, but suddenly he had a thought that they needed to choose who they could save, saying they couldn't do everything, asking if he hadn't said that before. He added that if they screwed this up, it could all slip through their fingers. While he was saying this, Tofuku thought about what Hiyuki said about destroying everything because she was tired of choosing their battles. The master swordsman was shown again, and Kyura seemed to be struggling greatly with his situation, as he appeared to be in extreme pain. Besides that, the cracks inside the storehouse were growing larger, and in other parts, things were completely falling apart, causing Mr. Inazuma's sister to worry. Chihiro noticed this and said to himself that this wasn't good anymore. So he told Hiyuki that if they didn't do something, The people there would be in danger, but before he could finish, Hiyuki said she knew that. They both said simultaneously that they needed to stop Kyura at that moment. So even though the entire place was falling apart, they charged at the head of the Sazanami clan. Although Kyura was injured and struggling with what was happening inside his mind, he bravely faced the two. At that moment, the inside of the storehouse seemed to be completely destroyed, and in reality, people were asking what happened and if the auction was over because Kyura's projection had disappeared. Then, it appeared that Hakuri used his powers to bring something from inside the storehouse to the auction stage, as a blob appeared. Because of this, the battle was brought to the auction stage, with Chihiro attacking Kyura from the front while Hiyuki was at the back. Chihiro noticed they had ended up on the auction stage, and Hiyuki seemed to notice this too, while Kyura used the centipede skill on them again. Due to Kyura's use of this skill, Chihiro and Hiyuki were thrown to opposite sides of the auction arena. Meanwhile, Kyura fell to his knees looking extremely weak, and Chihiro thought that it wasn't Hakuri who transported them because they weren't registered in the storehouse, so he wondered if the Shinuchi was causing the instability. He also questioned what would happen inside the storehouse, and at that moment, Mr. Shiba arrived and asked Hakuri what was happening. Back to Kyura, who was gasping for breath, and liquid and plants seemed to be emerging from the Shinuchi. Soon, a large black circle appeared on the auction arena stage, and it overflowed, spilling over the edges of the stage. From that liquid, countless flowers and plants grew, causing people to panic, asking what it was, and one person said it was growing on them. Another person's face started bleeding because plants and flowers were growing from inside his body, causing the man to cry in pain. Chihiro was shocked by this, while Hiyuki remained indifferent, and both Mr. Shiba and Hakuri were amazed that Kyura could use the Shinuchi. However, they didn't know that the master swordsman was behind this, and Kyura was desperately trying to force it out of his body. Hiyuki said she would kill Kyura, but Hakuri stopped her, which confused her. She asked Hakuri if he hadn't said they needed to kill Kyura, but Hakuri replied that the circumstances had changed because Shinuchi's impact on the storehouse was now too great. We were shown the prisoners who hadn't yet escaped the storehouse, and Hakuri added that the storehouse was crumbling, so it would soon disintegrate. Hiyuki said that this was just another reason to kill Kyura, but Hakuri explained that Kyura was desperately struggling to maintain the storehouse, so if they killed him, the storehouse would disappear. Hiyuki asked how they could save the people inside, and Hakuri answered that someone needed to go in to infuse each person with spirit power so he could transport them, but Mr. Shiba won't allow it. Hiyuki wondered who Mr. Shiba was, as he explained that Kyura was barely holding out and is only gonna last a few more seconds, making entering the storehouse suicide. Hiyuki agreed it was suicide, but said they couldn't abandon those inside, like Mr. Inazuma's sister, but suddenly she remembered someone telling her that she couldn't save everyone. In the next scene, we were shown Mr. Inazuma's sister who appeared to be falling into the void, and Hakuri remembered what Chihiro had said about not being able to bear it if he did nothing, and an enchanted blade killed people. Back to the present, where Hakuri called out to Chihiro, which seemed to anger Mr. Shiba, who tried to stop Hakuri because he was at his limit. He also said that both Chihiro and Hakuri would die from what they were about to do. Chihiro mentioned the words, "every last one," suggesting he wanted to save everyone in the storehouse. In the next scene, Mr. Inazuma's sister was shown again falling into the void, and in those moments, she recalled memories from when she was alive, when suddenly a blob appeared near her hand. From there, Chihiro emerged trying to reach for her, with Hakuri telling him to hurry. He managed to tap the hand of Yu's sister, or Mr. Inazuma. With Hakuri's help, it gradually transformed into a bubble to transport them out of the storehouse. Chihiro felt relieved upon seeing this. Because of that, he became determined to touch all of them to set them free. However, it was evident that many still remained inside. Hiyuki asked how many were left, and Hakuri counted them. At first, he said 20, but it was actually 36. They were concerned whether they could save each one of them. When Chihiro noticed that the place was deteriorating faster, he thought he needed to hurry. Hakuri mentioned that the only thing preventing the storehouse from collapsing was his father's will. He explained that if the enchanted blade overpowered his father's will, the storehouse and Chihiro, along with everyone there, would die. In Shiba's mind, everything depended on Kyura. Meanwhile, chaos erupted in the auction hall as black liquid overflowed from the podium. Some people had flowers growing from their bodies, causing them to die slowly from the inside out. Others who witnessed this were shocked and couldn't understand what was happening. Kyura was out of control, so they needed to leave. The bidder from Kaminabi said they needed to evacuate, but the woman with him couldn't believe it. The man asked her if she wanted to die. He stated clearly that Rakuzaichi was over and the auctioneers done for. Meanwhile, Shiba was worried about Kyura. He thought it was impossible for him to control the Shinichi. He wouldn't be able to last much longer. Meanwhile, while kneeling and slowly being taken over, Kyura remembered someone telling him that he should quit this stupid Rakuzaichi. The one who said this was lying in a hospital bed. She admitted that she had been miserable the whole time, so she would finally be honest with Kyura. She said that Kyura had been brainwashed by all that sacred tradition stuff. This was his spouse speaking, saying that perhaps they wouldn't have made her marry him if it weren't for Rakuzaichi. And if Rakuzaichi had never happened, then he wouldn't have become a bad person. Back in the present, Kyura wondered why he suddenly remembered that. His wife's last words, wishing that Rakuzaichi had never happened. He remembered moments with his family, when they were eating together happily. Because of this, he suddenly slammed the gavel in the auction hall, shattering that happy memory. Next, he recalled when his father Sora told him that he had fulfilled his duty. Therefore, from that day forward, he would be the family patriarch, and his father had entrusted everything to him. This reinvigorated Kyura, and he fought against the Shinichi. The black liquid gradually disappeared from where he stood as he declared that he wouldn't let this end, and he would kill anyone who attempted to interfere. Shiba and the others were surprised to notice that he had overcome the Shinichi due to his devotion to Rakuzaichi. His child had staked everything on this, so his persistence was impressive. Kyura stood up in rage, holding his gavel, and called them all crazy. Chihiro, his son Hakuri, and Hiyuki, who had worked together to destroy Rakuzaichi. Therefore, he announced that he would pay anything to whoever could kill them. The auction must continue, he insisted. The Kaminabi member there couldn't believe it. Because of what he said, several people began targeting Hakuri. He was clearly struggling, but fortunately, Hiyuki came to the rescue, telling him to just focus. She said she wouldn't let anyone get near him. Other people inside became concerned due to the powerful explosion caused by Hiyuki's flame bone. Even Shiba was guarding Hakuri's side, telling him not to give up. Inside the storehouse, Chihiro continued tapping the people left inside. He approached them one by one to save them. Again, with Hakuri's help, they turned into bubbles and were transported outside. Hakuri remembered the woman with ice skin who took her own life. Because of that, he vowed not to let any more lives slip through his hands again. Though he was vomiting, he still held on because 10 people remained. Meanwhile, the Shinichi wouldn't give up and took over Kyura's body again. Flowers began growing from his body, causing the subspace to deteriorate faster, which worried Hakuri and the others. Only one person remained, so Chihiro hurried to reach them. Moments later, Kyura finally gave in and the storehouse collapsed. When Shiba asked Hakuri what happened, he replied that they had done it. They had saved everyone, and indeed, they could be seen outside and safe. He looked for Chihiro and found him on the stage, near Kyura. Once again, Kyura thought about what his wife had said, but he claimed that wasn't the reason why he failed. He remembered when Chihiro mentioned that his best would have been to believe in his son Hakuri. He admitted that Chihiro was right about that. Because Hakuri didn't align with his ideals, he had turned away from him. On the stairs, an exhausted Hakuri couldn't hold back his tears. Kyura confessed that he, not his children, had failed in his duty. He let go of the Shinichi in his hand, and Chihiro pondered this. He had managed to escape the Shinichi's influence, as Kyura Sazanami. Flowers completely covered Kyura's body, and he died. People in the hall were curious about what had happened. Some noticed that he was already dead. Hakuri remained motionless as he heard that his father, Kyura Sazanami, had died. The people there also saw that Chihiro Rokuhira was present. They continued attacking towards Hakuri, who was protected by a concerned Shiba. Meanwhile, he became worried when he noticed the damage inside. A woman from Kaminabi asked what that sound was. Her companion responded that as if the Shinichi and aftermath of shock waves weren't chaotic enough. He added that Hiyuki was going berserk and would really cause damage. The woman with glasses said they were lucky to have gotten out, but her companion noticed that the front entrance was also in bad condition. Shiba became concerned when he noticed that the entire place was gradually collapsing. Some people ran to escape, but others were looking at the podium because the enchanted blade was still there. They wanted to get it and claim it for themselves. So they rushed to the podium where Chihiro was. However, Shiba transported there, carrying Hakuri, saying they needed to leave. Nevertheless, Chihiro just kept staring at the Shinichi beside Kyura. He thought about what happened, so he tried to reach for it and took it. In an instant, they suddenly disappeared, which puzzled the men there. Even the enchanted blade was gone. Meanwhile, the floor had completely collapsed, including the ceiling inside. Fortunately, they had managed to teleport outside. Shiba said that was close. However, Shiba was surprised to notice that Chihiro was missing when he had just been holding onto him. Someone stepped on the Shinichi and said it was now safe to hold. Chihiro remained quiet while Hiyuki declared that, as she had said, she would take both enchanted blades. They were at the podium, and Tefuku was watching from nearby. Chihiro figured out that when Shiba was about to transport them, Tefuku had brought him to that alternate space. Hiyuki suddenly apologized to him. Meanwhile, because Chihiro wasn't there, Shiba needed to go back. Hakuri stopped him because the inside of the place had collapsed. Soon after, even the outside was destroyed. The Rakuzaichi auction house was completely damaged. However, Shiba noticed shadows from inside. It turned out to be Hakuri and Tefuku carrying Chihiro. When Chihiro asked to be put down, Shiba supported him because he was staggering. Hiyuki bid farewell, saying she would go ahead while carrying the sword. Shiba called her attention and asked where she would take the Shinichi. She replied that she had made an offer which Chihiro had accepted. Shiba confirmed this with him, and Chihiro nodded in agreement. On the side, Hakuri asked what they had discussed, and Chihiro said it was about what would happen next. When Hakuri asked him what he would do now, Chihiro shared that Shiba had told him not to worry about his family. In a flashback to the underground cemetery, one of Hakuri's siblings had begged Shiba to kill him. He said if he lived, he couldn't face Tenri anymore. However, Shiba refused. He sent him home because they had younger siblings left behind. He said he wouldn't criticize Tenri's way of life, but they didn't want their younger siblings to follow the same path. So Shiba sent him home. If he could set them straight, then Tenri's death wouldn't be in vain. Back to Chihiro and Hakuri's conversation, Hakuri said he couldn't go home. He was now an enemy of the Sazanami clan. He remembered his father's final moments and said that no matter how warped he was still his North Star. Therefore, he admitted he didn't know what to do now. Because of what Hakuri said, Chihiro remembered being in the same situation when his father died. Hakuri was about to say something more, but he turned when you called for his sister. The child ran towards her, and they embraced tightly. Yu was sobbing, having finally seen his sister again. Chihiro said that Hakuri had saved them. Hakuri remembered the woman's words, that even outside the cage, there was no hope. However, when he saw Yu crying, he pondered about the thought of hope. He then asked Chihiro if he would allow him to fight alongside him. He also thought about how Chihiro had valued him. Therefore, he wanted to prove the value that Chihiro saw in him. For more than 2 centuries, countless lives had been given a price, and the hope of those people had been stolen by Rakuzaichi, the stew that stirred the passions of vile lowlifes. Finally, after all those years, at this moment, the curtain falls. The Rakuzaichi auction had been reduced to ashes, so the question is, what would come next? In a flashback to Chihiro and Hiyuki's conversation, Chihiro admitted he didn't want others to possess the enchanted blades. However, Hiyuki said the circumstances were different now. On that day, for the first time, Chihiro had glimpsed a fraction of the Shinichi's power. Because of this, he realized it was more immense than he had expected. It was horrifying. His father had rarely mentioned anything about the Shinichi, and perhaps that was because he wanted to hide its power. Chihiro didn't know how it happened or when it would go berserk again. He wouldn't let the Shinichi be on the loose. He remembered that Kaminabi had created its seal, and he had no ability to create a seal like that. Hiyuki responded that this was why he should surrender it to Kaminabi, but he said the risk would be too great if he gave it away. They had seen what happened at Rakuzaichi. The Hishaku were there, and one of them had said their goal was to use the Shinuchi. Tofuku wondered that even though they expected Kaminabi would buy that enchanted blade, they still submitted it to the auction. Chihiro added that he knew only Kaminabi could seal away the Shinuchi, but it puzzled him that the Hishaku actually wanted them to obtain it. If Kaminabi got it, then the Hishaku would make their move again. So what? Hiyuki asked. To seal it, Kaminabi needed to get it. Chihiro pondered this. Hiyuki added that for what they would do with it, they would drive them out and stop those doing evil. They couldn't let the enchanted blades be used for evil. They had the same objective. So, he released the Shinuchi and gave it to her. But he wasn't simply willing to step away. Once Kaminabi got the Inten under their jurisdiction, her mission would be complete. Therefore, he had a solution that would work for both of them. Hiyuki was curious about what he was saying. In Chihiro's mind, he needed to know what his father had held back. The more he investigated it, the more he would learn. So, he requested to let him join Kaminabi.